Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is a game that's adored the world over for being one of the most ambitious and enjoyable crossovers in gaming history. I mean, have you seen this lineup? Where else can Mario and Minecraft Steve fight Sonic and Pac-Man? But as impressive as this game's fighter roster is, something that is arguably just as cool but doesn't get half as much credit is Ultimate's stage roster. After all, what's cooler than getting to see iconic video game locations be reinterpreted as the settings for these epic showdowns? Ultimate has a whopping 115 stages, a massive selection of mostly returning stages from past Smash entries with a few new ones here and there. Now, some of these stages are pure multiplayer bliss, while others I wouldn't wish on my worst enemies. Today, I'll be taking a look at both of those ends of the quality spectrum, as well as everything in between as I rank every single stage in Smash Ultimate from worst to best. But before we can get started, there are a few ground rules I need to go over for this list. Firstly, out of respect for the wide array of rule sets this game supports, I'm going to be judging maps primarily based on what I consider to be the most enjoyable match settings for that stage. After all, it wouldn't exactly be fair to judge Final Destination under how it operates in a timed match with items on and 8 players, or to judge Big Battlefield for how it plays in a 1v1 stock match with items off. This same principle also applies to the hazards off toggle. Most stages will be assessed using their hazards on version unless they benefit greatly from having them turned off to the point that they're competitively viable. The rule of thumb here is that fun reigns supreme, and so the stages that give me the best times overall will top the list regardless of the context they're played in. There are also quite a few major factors I'm considering when ranking them, with the most important one being the aforementioned gameplay enjoyability, but other considerations include the aesthetics, the uniqueness of the stage, and also whether or not the stage does justice to the original game it's representing. One point that will not be accounted for regarding these locales is their music. Due to Ultimate having such a vast catalog of tunes, pretty much every map can be made to feel much better or worse with the right music selection, and I'm not about to dock, let's say, Find Me any points just because there's a 0.001% chance that the Freaky Forms medley can play on it. The only times that songs will be relevant factors in this video is for stages where the music is actually linked to the stage in a unique way, such as the musician's gimmick in New Donk City Hall. My final disclaimer is also the most important one, and that is that everything I say in this video is just my own opinion. Obviously, I'll find some aspects of stages fun while other people may think those same aspects are completely unbearable, or vice versa. I'm going to be providing rationale for why I placed each stage where I did, but this is by no means meant to be some sort of end-all be-all objective measure of quality. It's just how much I like each one, and I encourage you to tell me about your own favorite and least favorite stages in the game down below in the comments because I enjoy discussing them with fellow fans of the Smash series. All I ask is that you keep the conversation civil. Now that all the rules are explained, it's time to finally start the tier list proper. So grab yourself some snacks and get comfortable because it's stage ranking time. When it comes to Smash stage design, one cannot fully appreciate the majestic peaks without first exploring the darkest of valleys. And this particular valley starts out pitch black. This map is a special kind of hell that brings the fire right to you, placing it at the very bottom of this stage ladder. I think it's pretty obvious at this point which map it is I'm talking about, but in case you're still in the dark, then gird yourself, because here it comes now. Number 115, 75 meter. This stage is completely miserable. It doesn't matter how many players you have, what items are on, or what alteration you make to the rules, because this map is dead set on giving you one of the least fun matches of your life. For starters, 75 meter is a massive stage. That in and of itself isn't a bad thing, as I do quite enjoy large stages if their layout utilizes the added space effectively, but this one does the exact opposite of that, making every single girder extremely tiny so that no one really has any room to operate whatsoever. Even if it had no hazards, this stage still wouldn't be fun. But then we get to the trouble bugs, which are fire enemies that can just spawn in at some of the major junctures of the stage, making navigating this already tedious map completely unbearable. And then you have Donkey Kong himself, who launches jacks to make the only decently sized platform into a kill zone. This map doesn't want you to enjoy the fun combat that Smash has to offer. It just wants to bully you, and use arcade nostalgia to gaslight you into thinking you're not being harassed. I really hope Sakurai never gives us another one-to-one retro level recreation stage with as little thought put into it as this one ever again. Number 114, Palutena's Temple. So do you remember how I just said I like big stages that use the extra space well? Yeah, this isn't one of them. Here's a map with the exact opposite problem of 75 meter, because dying is a genuine struggle due to there being so many enclosed areas, or caves of life as they're better known. More well-designed mega stages come up with clever ways to force players into the open and get that KO count up, but Palu's Temple has nothing of this sort. However, as much as this one's a war crime, it does have two neat positives, the first being Palutena's guidance, and the second being that this is the closest thing we've got to an HD version of Kid Icarus Uprising Chapter 20. Hopefully that last part won't be true for too much longer though. Number 113, Hannonbow. In a word, this stage is incoherent. The leaf platforms are too small and are especially annoying terrain after they've been tilted a good deal. The branch on the left can't be stood on and the water at the bottom isn't real water, making for an unintuitive and cramped mess. But this stage's biggest sin is undoubtedly its visuals. Hannonbow is a complete eyesore that has me looking at the timer every few seconds in a match, praying for the sweet release of the results screen. Number 112, Pac-Land. Just like the last one, this stage is visually appalling. It has some neat gimmick ideas like the wing shoes letting you jump higher for a bit, but all of this level's neat quirks are undermined by it being an auto-scroll stage. Yeah, spoiler alert, but levels where the screen automatically scrolls horizontally or vertically generally aren't going to do too well on this list. I'm here to fight first and platform second, not the other way around. Also, this wasn't a factor in Pac-Land getting so low, but Pac-Maze from the 3DS died for this to come back, so I am a little bitter. I know that one didn't return likely because of the Power Pellet gimmick that was designed specifically with the 3DS's multiplayer in mind, but come on, they could have figured something out. I digress, on to the next stage. Number 111, Mario Bros. This map turns every match it's played on into a completely different game than the usual Smash, and as such this stage has very poor synergy with most other gameplay mechanics. Oh, you got the hammer item? That's cool. Shame the ceilings won't let you actually kill with it. Find a Maxim tomato? Neat. Now you can heal the damage that this map makes nigh irrelevant. I do appreciate how Sakurai was trying something unique with this one, but there are only so many different ways you can throw one of the stage enemies at an opponent and kill them with it before the gimmick loses its novelty and you realize just how little this map has to offer besides that. And that concludes our F tier. Next up are the stages that I think are just bad. Most of them have at least a few redeeming qualities, but their negatives are a good deal more abundant and relevant. I get a lot more enjoyment out of discussing the stages I really love, but I still think this next group has some pretty interesting talking points, so without further ado, let's dive into the D tier.
Oh no!
Number 110, Mushroom Kingdom 2. I just think this stage is pretty irritating. There's no one aspect of it that's abhorrent, but everything just kinda comes together to create a wholly unpleasant experience. The center of the map has annoying geometry, which is made worse by the logs that push you down into it, as well as Birdo, who's an annoying hazard that also forces you towards the center and feels completely unrewarding to defeat. And don't even get me started on Pidgeot. He's the most... Actually, I don't have any problems with Pidgeot. I think he's pretty cool. But overall, this is still a very bad stage. Number 109, Great Plateau Tower. You may be surprised by this placement, but the more I thought about it, the more this stage is absolutely worthy of calling itself one of the worst in the game. In fact, there's so many different reasons why I think this one falls short that for the sake of brevity, I'm going to be focusing more on the problems that are a bit more specific to this map during this segment. However, please keep in mind that there's a good few ultimate stages down the road on the list with issues that are also applicable to Great Plateau Tower. Right then, this stage fundamentally misses what makes Breath of the Wild so fun. At the start of that game, you're shown a picturesque shot of Hyrule, and this stage provides you with a similar view. But the reason why that scene is so cool in the original was because the player knows that everything they see is somewhere they can actually travel to and explore. But in the Smash version, you're just stuck on top of the tower and can't go anywhere. This one was begging to be a traveling stage to show off all the beautiful locations in Breath of the Wild. I understand they were under a time crunch for Ultimate, so maybe a traveling map wouldn't have been feasible, but even then they could have absolutely made a stationary stage work. They just needed to choose a location with fun geometry and add in a few cool elements that are representative of the original piece, neither of which are present in this stage. What we got instead was a boring single platform with a big destructible cave of life in the center. There's no hazards, gimmicks, or even some simpler visual touches like weather changes or a day to night cycle. The Cave of Life also makes this one boring and tedious in matches, regardless of the rule set you use. It's a loser through and through. Number 108, Cloud Sea of Allrest. Much of what I just said for the previous entry is also true for this one. Xenoblade is a series renowned for its beautiful and expansive environments, and this stage definitely squanders that potential by only showing off the Titans from the outside. The map would lead you to believe that riding around on Gramps' back is a core mechanic of navigating the world of Allrest in XC2, when in actuality there are only 2 chapters where this happens, and with very brief exceptions, it's pretty much entirely relegated to the first few cutscenes in the game. Something like the Argentum Trade Guild definitely would have worked better in my opinion. That spot really captures the expansive and gorgeous scenery of the game better, and is a location you spend quite a good deal more time on than Azurda's back. In terms of this map's geometry, it might not have a giant cave of life killing its center, but it does still have an incredibly uninspired and boring layout. But hold the phone, because here's the really interesting stage gimmick. Gramps moves his head around sometimes! Wow, that's so crazy! I do like the little banter he provides throughout the match, but that alone is nowhere near enough to salvage this one from the depths of this list. Number 107, Mushroomy Kingdom. The concept behind this stage is really amusing to me because it's literally just Sakurai's fanfiction. He said this is what he thinks the original 1-1 from the first Super Mario Bros. Would look like in the present day if it had been abandoned since 1985. As much as I wanted to give this one a higher placement for its novel idea, it really is a slog to play on. Not only is this one an auto-scroll, it's a non-stop auto-scroll, and some sections like the part with the pipes are dreary to get through due to just how much you need to completely disengage from a fight just to platform and avoid being killed by the left blast zone. I could also knock it for never bringing back the 1-2 version from Brawl, but if we're being real, that iteration wasn't any better. So all things considered, this one was probably best left in Sakurai's Wattpad account. Number 106, Rainbow Cruise. This level is pretty good when it's just the ship moving to the left, but once the vertical auto-scroll starts, this stage becomes truly egregious. Again, if I wanted to platform so bad, I'd just play Pizza Tower instead. Rainbow Cruise has some pretty high highs relative to other scrolling maps, but its lows are so bad that overall it's a complete waste of time. Number 105, Spear Pillar. I appreciate what this stage is going for, and I do tend to like maps where one of a large pool of different possible actions can happen at random, but this entry in that archetype is ruined by 2 things. Firstly, the stage's geometry itself is frustrating because the bottom platform is narrow ceiling hell where you can live to like 400% if you get lucky enough. The second thing that ruins this stage for me are the Pokemon gimmicks themselves. as several of them are just disruptive for the sake of being disruptive, while adding zero depth to the map's gameplay. For example, when Dialga slows down time, it's slowed for everybody, which only turns the game into a PowerPoint presentation that no one's really able to take advantage of. The same goes for Palkia flipping the screen. It really just feels more like an impartial inconvenience than anything else. The other abilities that don't involve warping space and time are pretty cool though, especially when an earthquake breaks open the top of the stage, making the layout significantly more bearable for a bit. But the fact that you need to wait for a random occurrence to make the map's layout not awful really shows just how fundamentally flawed this one is. Number 104, Bridge of Eldin. Wow, Brawl is not off to a good start here. Now I don't know who Sakurai thought he was fooling when he signed off on this one, but this is just a regular walk-off. Granted, King Bulbin does show up sometimes to blow up the middle of the stage, but relative to many other map hazards, he really doesn't show up that often, so nearly 80% of the time this stage is just a straight line with nothing else happening. In fact, to prove just how long it takes King Bulbin to show up on average, he will not show up for the entirety of this segment, and this footage is not of the Hazards Off version, nor has it been spliced or slowed down. This stage did have good ideas behind it, it's just completely gutted by the infrequency of the main hazard and a lack of platforms or secondary gimmicks to bridge the gap between his visits. Also, honestly, this map should have been the Bridge of Sheldon instead. Number 103, Super Happy Tree. Wow, it rhymed. It was kind of neat how it worked out like that. Anyways, Battlefield clones are something this list has no shortage of, and it turns out the worst of the bunch is the original Battlefield clone. Or I guess technically I should be calling it the original Dreamland 64 clone. The Achilles heels of this map are the horizontal blast zones, as they're way too far from the main body of the stage. There are some cloud platforms out there, but traversing between the clouds and cardboard ranges from aggravating to unfeasible, depending on the character. This leads to an inevitable disconnect between opposing characters in casual play, and mind-numbing camping ensues. What I do like about this one is the rename they gave it in Ultimate, because Super Happy Tree is just such a whimsical and fun name. I wish it belonged to a better stage. Number 102, Dreamland GB. Yet another stage with a clever concept that's completely kneecapped by subpar execution. Playing inside Kirby's Dreamland through a Game Boy screen is inspired, but a good deal of the environments you're randomly sent to feature rapid auto-scrolling. Now this usually doesn't last too long, but the speed of it is breakneck relative to something like Mushroomy Kingdom, and the Game Boy screen gimmick has very poor synergy with auto-scroll due to the edges of your screen being obscured. To make matters worse, some of the few remaining layouts that don't feature auto-scroll have hard platforms on the left and right sides, creating caves of life that greatly hinder KO potential. Also, this didn't really have a significant effect on the placement, but they removed the alternate gray version in Ultimate for no good reason. Number 101, Mishima Dojo. It's always interesting to see how Sakurai goes about adapting stages from more traditional fighting games into Smash, but Mishima Dojo doesn't add anything new to the conversation. The stage's walls, ceiling, and large size exclude it from tournament viability, and the layout is too dull and barebones to make for an interesting casual experience. The destructible wall gimmick is something we've seen before, and this iteration of the mechanic lacks the intrigue provided by its ancestors. It's like if Shadow Moses Island and King of Fighters Stadium had a baby that didn't get any of the good genes. Actually, now that I think about it, forsaking your bloodline is very much in the spirit of Tekken, so if nothing else, Mishima Dojo definitely retains some of its home series core values. Number 100, Yggdrasil's Altar. And now the time has finally come to unveil a special visual companion I've prepared just for this ranking. You ready? Introducing the Smash Ultimate Stage Design Template. Yeah, suffice to say, this game was determined to represent New Series to the fullest and most extravagant extent possible, and the stage design suffered as a result of this method. Instead of getting just one memorable location from the original piece as a stage, we end up getting the entire world shoved in the background while the thing we actually play on is a basic bland platform with nothing going on. This design philosophy is not inspired, nor is it immersive. Does the altar fly around the world like this in the original Dragon Quest XI? Heck no. But we need an FD platform to zoom around and show off how pretty Erdrea looks, so it flies now. The superior design philosophy is to just settle on a single locale that faithfully translates to Smash in a way that provides a unique and exciting experience while reminding fans of the fun they had playing the original work. But this approach more often than not results in neither of those goals being achieved. And I believe Yggdrasil's Altar is one of the quintessential victims of this format. Number 99, Paper Mario. I always thought it was weird how this one's a transforming stage with 2 settings from Sticker Star and 1 from the Thousand Year Door. It feels like they should either all be from the same game or all from different games. That's just a little weird quirk I noticed though. It's not an actual problem I have with the stage itself. No, my issue here is that 2 of the 3 layouts suck. The SS Flavion from Thousand Year Door steals the show here, as this segment features enjoyable geometry and the appearance of 2 sea creatures from the series, helping to make this part feel even more exciting, as well as making it feel distinct from stages with the same general idea. Meanwhile, Hither Thither Hill is fine enough, at least until the fan appears, causing Wind to take a passable stage layout and turn it into one of the most unpleasant sections in the game, because you're either being forced into a wall or off the stage entirely. Speaking of being forced off the stage, I have no idea how the Bowser's Sky Castle variation got approved, because there is nowhere to fight. Bowser's head is unsafe because it's spinning half the time, and the 2 platforms on either side of him are too small and are extremely unforgiving with recoveries. If this stage were only the Bowser's Castle segment, it would get F tier, no questions asked. And to think, this part used to be even worse back in Smash 3DS. But all 3 sections considered, this one still leaves a good deal to be desired, so it's going in D. Number 98, Congo Jungle. This one may be a classic, but it always struggled when it came to deciding whether it wants to be a chill casual stage or a more zany one. Everything above the main platform would lead you to believe the former, but then you have the exceptionally intrusive cannon below the stage, which feels like it belongs on a map that's a bit more chaotic. I also just find this one to be pretty unsightly. I mean, look at how much of this stage is just swallowed up in black. I know they wanted the Smash 64 stages to look close to their original incarnations in Ultimate, but this one definitely aged the worst of the bunch from a visual standpoint. Number 97, Mario Galaxy. Now I know what you're thinking. It's based on Mario Galaxy, so of course it's good, right? Well, unfortunately, I think this stage is a far cry from the game it's based on. The only real point of interest here is the gravity gimmick, which wraps characters, items, and most projectiles to follow the curvature of the planet. I find this mechanic to be incredibly underutilized. Like, they could have had other planets float by over the course of the match, each with its own field of gravity that sucks stuff in. As it stands, you can go pretty much an entire game on this stage without even really needing to plan around the gravity gimmick, unless you're one of the small handful of characters with projectiles that reject it, like Fox or Robin. Mario Galaxy deserves something wackier and more interesting than this boring and bare-bones replica of its trademark mechanic. Number 96, Garreg Mach Monastery. If there's any stage in Ultimate that succeeded in pulling the wool over my eyes, this is definitely the one. Back in 2020, while I'm watching the Byleth presentation, I keep thinking, oh wow, this looks like a normal traveling stage. I love those. Maybe we're free from this. But once Sakurai got to actually explain the map, I couldn't help but groan, because this is hands down the most uninteresting and sanitized traveling stage in the series history. The marketplace part at the beginning is fine. I quite like the destructible stalls. But then there's the other 3. The reception hall is just a walk-off with chandeliers that are too high up to usually have any impact on a fight. The cathedral is just a walk-off with 2 extra platforms. And the bridge section is just a walk-off, period. What is the point of traveling between these locations when they play so similarly? It's like stage morphing Final Destination with Omega Form Battlefield. Why bother? Number 95, Green Hill Zone. It pains me to put such an iconic location so low on the list, but this is entirely warranted. Is a giant bowl the first thing that comes to mind when you think back on Sonic's debut level? Didn't think so. This is another instance of the background looking like it would be way more fun as a stage. Not only is the bowl boring, but it keeps characters alive for way too long. And sure, the terrain can be damaged and fall away, but this stage isn't particularly large, so the newly formed gaping hole in the middle feels like something of an overcorrection and the stage becomes a bit too dangerous. There's also the checkpoint markers, which act as a hazard even though that's the exact opposite of what they do in the series. Green Hill Zone isn't really especially awful at any point in time, it's just kind of vaguely unpleasant throughout the whole match. Number 94, Mushroom Kingdom 64. I like this stage's gimmicks, but not its layout. The warp pipes, piranha plants, and scales all help to make this one feel just like the original Super Mario Bros., far more than the stage that is literally just straight up a level from that game. However, while this map might have the aesthetics and gimmicks needed to bring Mario's first adventure to mind, the layout is a bit of a hodgepodge, particularly the left side, which makes KOs a chore. And while the graphics definitely succeed at reminding me of Mario 1, the background is just a bunch of level elements slapped together and it feels jarring and incoherent. Does anyone else find the beetle bouncing on the spring really distracting? It might be just me. This stage is bad, but just barely. Which means that yes, it's time for a tier change. Next up are the stages that have good and bad traits in somewhat equal measure, so on the whole they end up being pretty neutral in terms of quality. So get ready, because it's time to kick off the... Where's the cave, Triple? You were supposed to say its name 20 minutes ago. You mean Northern Cave? Oh, don't worry, I think we're getting pretty close to it. But yeah, bring in the OK stages, it's time for the C tier. Number 93, Venom. There's not a lot I have to say about this one. The layout is kinda mediocre for reasons I'll discuss on the next stage, but I do like the risk-reward of trying to recover under the ship to get to the opposite ledge. Obviously, this map looks a lot better visually than it did back in Melee, but I still think it's kind of uncanny how the Great Fox is just perpetually flying towards you the whole time. Yeah, I don't know, the way it's always staring straight into my soul makes me a little bit uncomfortable, like... Number 92, Princess Peach's Castle. Here's a stage with a cool gimmick, as the colored buttons that spawn platforms do allow for some fun strategy. However, the geometry of the castle itself doesn't make for the best battles. Having a huge tower split the screen into halves can lead to fights feeling a bit disconnected. Either everyone's going to be on one side, leaving the other half unused, or the fray will be split between the two halves of the map, which breaks up the crowd and leads to the fights being much smaller in scale. It's not terrible design by any means, it's just kinda counterproductive to large scale fights, which is something I personally quite enjoy. Bigger stages do this a lot too, but they often make up for it by giving players a unique opportunity to fight on their own terms at a select point across the vast terrain the map offers. But this stage doesn't have that at all. What this stage does have, however, are bonsai bills, which help to negate the issue I mentioned by temporarily forcing everyone to the one safe side while the other side is very much still in use by the bonsai bill. So to summarize, this stage doesn't suck. It just doesn't offer me the best matches most of the time on account of its normal layout, in spite of the neat gimmicks it has. Number 91,
3D Land.
Hooray, it's auto-scroll time again. At its worst, this stage is even more obnoxious than something like Mushroomy Kingdom, as there's a good deal more verticality and disruptive obstacles to the platforming here. So then, why isn't it in D or F tier? Well, this stage has two critical saving graces, and they both come in the form of brief breaks from the autoscroll. Not only do you not have to worry about keeping up with this stage anymore, but these two areas are visually intriguing and feature chaotic but enjoyable platform arrangements, as well as deadly but clearly telegraphed hazards to keep fighters on their toes. Any chance we could get these as separate stages next game? Also, I promise not to turn this video into my stage wishlist for next Smash, but can we please get a 3D world map next game? I think this part of Piranha Creeper Creek would make for a really dynamic and fun map in Smash. But getting back to 3D Land, one other minor negative I have is that they did screw up the way the special music loops in Ultimate, like here, listen to this. Yikes. At the end of the day, this one might hail from an unfun stage archetype, but it's capable of some pleasant surprises here and there, so it's absolutely deserved at least a bit of redemption. Number 90, Dreamland 64. Now hold on just a minute, I know that this stage is the GOAT for some of you, and sure, if this were a ranking of stages from Smash 64 or Melee, Dreamland 64 would place leagues higher. But the sad truth is that the poor thing got power crept hard. Not only does it have a bajillion other Battlefield clones to compete with in Ultimate, but the existence of the Battlefield toggle means you can just make a Battlefield form greens now, rendering Dreamland completely redundant in terms of both gameplay and aesthetics. This stage will always have my respect due to its legacy, but I just cannot justify putting it any higher given the circumstances of Ultimate in the present day. Number 89, Minecraft World. Sakurai had some really big dreams for this one. He originally wanted players to be able to create stages in Minecraft and then port them to Smash, but unfortunately it didn't quite pan out. Let's take a look at what we got instead. Alright, it seems pretty faithful to the source material, and there's even 6 different biomes. Impressive, very nice. Now let's see what it looks like 20 seconds into the match. The template rears its head once more, and the blocks don't respawn either, so really what this stage is one of 6 competitive maps pretending to be casual maps for the first half minute of the fight. Although they're not really competitive stages either because they were all deemed too large to be viable. This one may be a bit of a letdown, but it's not really that bad because there are 6 separate versions and that's nothing to sneeze at. Plus, we have a day-to-night cycle, and ultimately, it's just really neat seeing the world of Minecraft translate so seamlessly to Smash. Number 88, Jungle Japes. The rapids are a really cool idea for a hazard. I just believe that they're a smidge too oppressive to fight back against for a large chunk of the cast. Maybe if they were just a tiny bit harder to fall into, this stage could be a lot better. As for positives, the claptraps are a neat little touch to help keep things spicy, and man does this stage look absolutely gorgeous. In fact, it's probably in the top 10 best looking stages in the game, which is certainly a welcome change from its predecessor in 64. Number 87, Northern Cave. Speaking of pretty stages, the Race to Stop meteor in the background of this map is breathtaking. But it doesn't strike a very good balance between being aesthetically pleasing and not distracting from the fight itself. This problem is exacerbated by the fact that the stage was clearly intended to be used in competitive matches, so the chances are that if you're playing on this map, you want to be as locked in as possible, and the background isn't doing you any favors. So in summary, the visuals here are truly Northern Cave's greatest strength and weakness. I'm pretty sure this is the only cave stage in the game, and there aren't any others you should be anticipating seeing later on. Number 86, Dracula's Castle. I said it before with Spear Pillar, and I'll say it again here. I love stages where characters can show up in the background, do their little special move that affects the fight, and then leave. But here, all the cool Castlevania monsters just stay in the background instead of actually contributing to the battle. It's not like there was any chance of this map being viable anyways due to the short walls on either side, so you might as well make it a fun casual stage. If each of the monsters had its own unique attack, we could be looking at a contender for top 15 in the game. But as is, Dracula's Castle is just an okay stage that's carried by unique lighting and mildly interesting geometry. Number 85, Wii Fit Studio. It might be just a walk-off with randomly placed floating platforms, but I think it's neat how this stage matches Wii Fit trainers' relaxed demeanor. Adding to the simplistic layout, we have a giant mirror in the background, and the trainer's silhouette appearing from time to time to give yoga lessons. It's pretty funny how she can be in the middle of teaching you how to do a dancer pose while Ridley is getting ready to murder you in a spaceship explosion. It may be simple, but the wide array of possible platform arrangements and calm atmosphere help me to exercise restraint in not putting it any lower. Number 84, Hollow Bastion. You've heard the same song and dance many times by this point. It's another uninspired Ultimate DLC stage that suffers from cooler background syndrome. Only this one does have a few extra things working in its favor. Firstly, it kinda did succeed on the competitive end since it's tournament legal basically everywhere. The other big plus this stage has is Dive to the Heart, which transforms an already good looking stage into one of several really artsy stations of awakening. This looks especially awesome in the aforementioned competitive scene, as you get to see the stage take on a more solemn tone as the battle nears its climactic end. So sure, in terms of gameplay, this map could have been something a good deal more fun than what we actually got, but I can't help but respect the craftsmanship on the aesthetics here. Number 83? I really like how they composited Flat Zones 1 and 2 for Melee and Brawl respectively into Flat Zone X in Wii U. The different phases range from kinda annoying with Chef, to middle of the road with Fire and Helmet, to actually pretty fun with Oil Panic, and then there's Lion, which is overbearing to say the least. It certainly isn't good, but I can't really say I hate it either, because oftentimes the Tamers comboing someone into oblivion can be pretty funny. I know I said I wouldn't bring up the music unless it's relevant to the stage, and I don't count this as a hit against Flat Zone X in the ranking, but the music selection is absolutely pitiful for this stage in Ultimate due to Game & Watch not being lumped in with other miscellaneous old school franchises like Ice Climber and Duck Hunt. I still can't believe we're now living in a world where Midgar has more music than this stage. What a time to be alive. Number 82? Unova Pokemon League. Take note, Spear Pillar, this is how you do a Pokemon summon stage with an actually interesting layout, as the ramps that come in from time to time here on Unova help keep the fight interesting, and can even slam into you for some damage if you're not careful. Where this stage drops the ball, however, are in the Pokemon gimmicks themselves. Not only are Reshiram and Zekrom the only two with actual attacks that impact the fight, but they each only have one move. Fusion Flare and Fusion Bolt are both solid enough as stage-altering Pokemon moves, but other visitors like Melodic show up. Why can't that one use something like Aqua Tail? So yeah, this one definitely had the right idea, it just needed the main gimmick to be developed a bit further. Number 81, Peach's Castle 64. The blast zones of this classic map feel like they're a smidge too far away from the main terrain itself, leading to a bit of an awkward waiting period for most knockouts that occur below the stage. The other main negative I have here is that this map doesn't really commit to any one particular Mario 64 reference. It's just kind of a mishmash of different platforms and textures from that game. But putting that aside, this stage makes for pretty enjoyable matches. The main platform rolling back and forth is a lot easier to keep pace with than the ground on an auto-scroll stage. Additionally, the floating gray triangular slabs and bumper can make for some really exciting KO saves while still being small and inconsistent enough to not allow this map to fully give in to the vice that is the Cave of Life. I think this one could have been somewhere in the top 30 if it was more reminiscent of its source material and tweaked just a few aspects of its scale. I'm trying to throw 64 as many bones as I can here. The poor thing's only got 2 more stages left. Number 80? Spiral Mountain. They absolutely cooked with the thought behind the main gimmick here. A stage that spins around to change the layout is a brilliant concept. But while this sounds really fun on paper, this map's execution squanders a good deal of that potential. 9 times out of 10, all the stage spinning does is change the terrain by a nigh insignificant amount. Sometimes if you're lucky, Spiral Mountain will briefly turn into a walk-off thanks to the bridge leading to Grunty's lair, and this does change the layout quite a good deal, but then immediately after it just goes back to the same general arrangement as before. This one's staying well out of D tier thanks to the dynamic moving platforms and the walls of the stage occasionally making for some delightfully unorthodox footholds, but it's losing points for failing to capitalize on a cool mechanic, playing one of the most silly and whimsical franchises in Smash far too straight, and somehow still fitting this place into the same old Ultimate DLC stage mold. Number 79, Smashville. We may still be in the C tier, but by this point there's a pretty large gap in the quality I attribute to the stages now and the stages at the bottom of the tier. Anyways, good on this one for being tournament legal. Smashville may not have a lot going on in the foreground, but it more than makes up for it with a real-time day-to-night cycle, as well as a myriad of Animal Crossing characters cameoing in the background. And just like in the original series, the characters that can show up depend on the time of day. KK Slider even gives a special performance on Saturday evenings. So yeah, there's a ton of nuance to love about the backdrop here, but as neat as this one may be, it's not quite as cool as number 78, Town and City. Very similar to the previous, just with better graphics and the addition of a city section the stage switches to instead of always taking place in the town. The main stage itself is bigger and more floating platforms show up than in Smashville, allowing this map to be turn illegal as it avoids stepping on the toes of its predecessor from Brawl. Yeah, there's not a lot more to say about this one. Number 77, Brinstar. Yet another stage that certainly has my respect despite placing in the bottom half. I really like how repulsive and eerie this place's background is with the wriggling brain. And I have to say, I can't think of too many other maps that are ballsy enough to let you just attack key parts of the infrastructure and let you temporarily ruin the whole thing for everybody else if you so desire. Yeah, there's not a ton of room to work with on this locale, so the stage hazards like the destructible terrain and rising acid can be a bit heavy-handed. They may not last long, but there are even times when only the top foothold is above the acid, and it just hits you how very transparently this one could have only been made during the Melee era with how unabashedly dangerous it is for its smaller size. Brinstar is like that one racist uncle that shows up for Thanksgiving dinner. You love him because you've known him since you were born, and he's family. But you definitely want to see less of him when his platforms are this toxic. Number 76, Fourside. Remember how I was saying Jungle Japes and Northern Cave are some of the best looking stages in the game? Well, now with Fourside in the room, you'd better believe those two are seated, because I consider this to be probably the single best looking stage in the game. So then, what the heck is it doing all the way down here? Well, it has a similar problem to Princess Peach's castle, with a big tower in the middle that can interrupt the natural flow of a battle. However, this time around the issue is lessened by the fact that the division isn't in the dead center of the stage, but rather more towards the left, so you're not missing out on quite as much as with the previous, even if I do think Fourside's terrain configuration isn't all that fun even setting the tower issue aside. Fortunately, the map's gimmicks like the crane and UFO help to make things just a bit more interesting. So yeah, with how much catch-up this stage is playing with its layout, it is basically carried by aesthetics at the end of the day, and that can only get you so far with me. Number 75, Shadow Moses Island. This one's another heartbreaker because Shadow Moses Island definitely has the aesthetics and aura of a top 10 stage in Ultimate, not to mention how awesome the codecs are. But just like the last entry, this map's design itself keeps it much lower on the pecking order. Not only is this stage a more cramped box than the cardboard one Snake himself uses, but many set pieces feel a good deal underbaked. Spotlights tracking you down and then playing the iconic sound effect is really cool, but why not make it so that the spotlights actually stun whoever they land on? This incentivizes staying undetected, which is, a major aspect of Metal Gear. And speaking of Metal Gear, the weapons of the same name just kinda show up in the background and roar at you. But why don't they actually attack like hazards in the Pokemon stages? If and when we ever get a new MGS stage, I really hope it's able to capture the series' forte for action and espionage a bit better. Actually, now that I think about it, maybe I can help with that. Here, give me a minute. Snake, you have a new mission. Tell Sakurai to give you a better stage next game so I can glaze it instead of putting it in C tier.
Hey, kid. Ever consider that maybe my stage is actually cool and you just have really bad opinions? Now, do yourself a favor and get off this private line before I show you some CQC courtesy of Dreamland fans everywhere.
I'll take it as a maybe. Number 74, Reset Bomb Forest. This stage is a tale of two phases. First you have humanity's war for the Wish Seed, but then Viridi nukes the stage, turning it into the titular Reset Bomb Forest. The war phase has a pretty solid layout, if not a bit lacking in the way of literally anything else of note going on. As for the forest, it lasts a good deal longer than the war section. which is fair because that's where most of the original level took place as well. However, calling it cramped is a bit of an understatement, as you'll be constantly ping-ponged around the dense mess of stone walls here. The good news is that the center and right portions of the stage are a bit more open, and the left features some destructible terrain, so once everything gets opened up, it's really not quite as bad as you might think at first. I also like how, if you have a sharp eye, you can notice that the Forest Phase's destroyed layout is just a more chaotic version of the War Phase's platforms. This little detail makes for some pretty neat environmental storytelling. This map also has a good thing going by bringing in Lurchthorn from time to time underneath the terrain. Kid Icarus has such awesome enemy designs. If only we got some more of the forces of nature on the stage, like Nutskis or Boom Stompers, it could have been bumpty-bombed up a lot higher. Number 73, Green Greens. When I think of casual melee stages, this is usually one of the first ones to come to mind. Strategically setting off the bomb blocks to mess with your opponents is always a good time, and I like how Wispy Woods can not only blow winded fighters like in Dreamland, but also drop apples from time to time. While we're on the subject of the apples, I do wish there was some kind of small visual indicator to tell you which of the apples can be thrown and which ones are healing items to further add to the strategy. This map can also be a bit cramped if you let the blocks stack too high, and sometimes the map's geometry makes it particularly easy to get trapped underneath, but with those flaws aside, I don't mind this one. Number 72, Wily Castle. For starters, they did something with this stage that I wish they'd do more often with other similar stages, that being combining two previous iterations into a single map. In Ultimate, Wily Castle features all the moving platform variations that used to be split between the two different versions of Smash 4. It also uses the nighttime background from Wii U, which is definitely the better looking of the two in my opinion, although maybe a day to night cycle or a toggle to select between them would have been even better. But that's honestly just splitting hairs. You know what's not splitting hairs though? The fact that this map was the ultimate stage template trope before it even became a real problem. And then there's the Yellow Devil, who I definitely have mixed feelings about. On the one hand, I like how you're incentivized to attack and defeat him via his explosion affecting everyone but the character who scored the final hit. What I don't like about the Yellow Devil is that oftentimes he's just sorta in the way, especially with how small the map is. There's a reason why this guy is literally the poster child for the stage hazards off toggle. Overall, I think he's a net negative for Wily Castle, but just barely. Taking everything into consideration, it's a fine enough stage. Number 71, Lilac Cruise. This stage definitely feels the most like Star Fox out of the three maps representing the franchise in Ultimate. The spectacle of the Pleiades traveling through all kinds of interstellar warfare looks really great, and while it is possible to get lost in the beautiful chaos of it all, it's not nearly as distracting as something like Northern Cave. Additionally, the light swaying of the ship back and forth definitely adds to the stage's ability to immerse you in the combat both in the match and in the stars, depending on which you find more interesting at the moment. Lilac may have been a point of controversy in the competitive scene, but that doesn't stop it from being a decent enough time casually. Number 70, Duck Hunt. I love how this stage perfectly replicates the famous NES Zapper game of the same name. The iconic Duck Hunt plains make for a naturally pretty solid layout. The grass and dog popping up from time to time are fun surprises as well. However, this stage doesn't exactly do a great job at bridging the gap between playing Duck Hunt and playing Smash. This map is basically asking you to play two games at once between fending off your foes and trying to kill the ducks, and focusing on either one actively hurts your chances of success at the other. While the birds do occasionally drop items when you hit them, oftentimes they're so high up when they get downed and the stage is so small that the player actually responsible for hitting the duck won't be able to get to the item in time before someone else snatches it up. They definitely could have come up with a better reward system here to more effectively incentivize actually paying the ducks any mind at all, because otherwise they're just kind of a neat background element. Number 69, Skyworld. It may have a textbook example of a big cave of life, but it doesn't take very long for the stone platforms to be destroyed, which opens the stage up greatly. Additionally, I've found that everywhere that isn't smack dab in the center of the four platforms can be pretty enjoyable, especially when that one extra floating stone scrolls in below the stage, as this can make for some thrilling high risk, high reward play. I do wish this map did a better job of representing the original Kid Icarus though. It's pretty bare bones when it comes to homages, since Sakurai was obviously more concerned with the future of the Kid Icarus series at the time of Brawl than he was for its past. Speaking of Kid Icarus, this is the highest ranked stage from that series on this list. Poor Pity Pat couldn't even fly as high as the B tier. You absolutely hate to see it. Sakurai, please show just a little bit of bias next game and give us like a Reaper Fortress traveling stage so your boy can place a bit higher in these things next time. But to Pit's credit, Skyworld did make it as close as it possibly could because it's time to change tiers once more. Next up we have the largest tier of them all, and it's jam-packed with stages that I'd confidently put my seal of approval on any day of the week. Welcome to the world of maps I consider to be good. It's the B tier.
Let's go!
Number 68, Coliseum. Very simple idea here, as it's just a walk-off with mechanical platforms that periodically rise up to form new footholds. But therein lies the beauty of this stage, because the tiles can arrange themselves in a plethora of different ways depending on how many rise up and the altitude that each one elevates to. And even though this arena isn't based on any one specific location from Fire Emblem, it still looks really nice and manages to properly evoke the general vibe that arena-like locations have throughout the series. Although unfortunately, none of them have ever looked quite as good as this stage, but I digress. The main takeaway here is that sometimes less is more. Number 67, Big Blue. The F-Zero stages are always so exhilarating, and this one is no exception. Whether you're on the Falcon Flyer or one of the smaller racing machines, you can't afford to stay anywhere for all that long because the vehicles are constantly slipping on and off the screen. Maybe this one could have done even better if there was just a bit more going on, like obstacles on the track, or the vehicles occasionally crashing and burning, or something of the sort. Also, the smaller cars are slightly uncomfortable to fight on due to how tiny and lopsided they are, but as is evident by the fact that we're in B tier now, none of these issues really diminish the map's enjoyability all that much in my eyes. Number 66, Big Battlefield. It sure is big, and it sure is Battlefield. There's not a lot worth talking about with this one, but I will say that it's nice to have an 8-player stage that isn't the size of China and filled to the brim with hazards. And even in Ultimate, many of the maps that weren't designed with 8-player combat as the primary consideration can sometimes feel cramped with larger groups of players. They also could have just made it 3 long platforms in the same placements as the original Battlefield, but I'm glad they went with the 6-platform layout here instead. It just feels really nice to have such a stable stage option in the rotation for big couch parties. Number 65, Mario Circuit. Honestly, I think that relative to most other traveling stages in the game, this one comes up just a bit short. I love Mario Kart 8, but I just don't find that game's Mario Circuit to be a particularly interesting location to traverse. None of these stops are really all that memorable, and I think even something like Mario Kart Stadium would have been a better choice. On that one you could have the stage travel to the stands, or the big U-turn, or the mess of pipe shortcut near the end. It may not be the best track in the game, but it's infinitely more interesting than a MOBA strip. Heck, Smash 3DS gave us a traveling stage based on one of the best rainbow roads in this series. I wish we got that back instead. So then, with that negative preamble established, what's this thing doing up in the B tier? Well, as I mentioned earlier, traveling stages are an archetype I find to be especially fun. The only way you could get me to really dislike one is if you just completely rob the layout of any enjoyability, and this offering is no Garreg Mach Monastery. Quite the opposite. In spite of its shortcomings, Mario Circuit still finds creative ways to give us some pretty delightfully unorthodox terrain thanks to the original game's anti-gravity gimmick. Shy Guys are also fun hazards, as they always are on the Mario Kart stages. Number 64, Halberd. Ah yes, the traveling stage that stops at exactly one destination. But hey, that's still one more than Yggdrasil does. Anyways, where Halberd picks up the slack is in the one stop it does make, because the deck of Meta Knight's ship has a lot going on between the mechanical arm and the combo cannon's cannonballs and laser. Still, it would have been nice if we got some more locations and actually got to fight inside the halberd itself like Kirby did in Superstar. But between the epic camera angles of the ship while traveling and the zany action provided on the ship's deck, this one makes me smile. Number 63, The Great Cave Effect. Now wait a minute! Even though we're still in the bottom half of the ranking, I'm aware that putting what's usually considered to be a bottom 5 stage even this high on the list is going to be met with some pushback. But please, just hear me out first. Let's begin by taking a look back at the stages I have in the 2 lowest places on the list and seeing how Great Cave Offensive avoids making the same mistakes as them. Palutena's Temple suffers from being way too safe and it taking way too long for anyone to die there. GCO has the Danger Zone gimmick, which insta-kills anyone that touches the lava if they're at 100% or greater, effectively avoiding this problem entirely. Meanwhile, 75 meter has the opposite problem, as there's nowhere to really engage in stable combat due to the overabundance of hazards and the lack of larger platforms. While it's true that Great Cave certainly has its fair share of deadly traps, it also features ample footing, as well as a large area completely devoid of hazards in which players can fight as normal if they please. I think it's also important to keep in mind that this stage was very transparently made to be used in 8-player battles. Sure, if you end up getting it after pressing random on the stage select in a 4-player match, it's not going to be fun. But if you can actually manage to pull together a crowd of 8 people these days, I think this one can be downright enjoyable thanks to what I believe to be this map's greatest strength, the exploration it allows for. This massive labyrinth is chock full of treasure chests waiting to be opened and players waiting to be KO'd, each one at a different end of a branching route, and sometimes the whole thing just makes you feel like a kid in a candy shop with all the different options available to you. No other stage offers an experience with quite this level of freedom, and where others might see this map as being overwhelmingly large, I see it as being refreshingly liberating. Now, is this stage perfect? Absolutely not. It's not even the best big stage in the game, or even the second best. For starters, although the danger zones are a very smart idea and they definitely do their job well, they do 25% per hit, which is almost as much as a Samus charge shot. I really feel like it should be toned down a smidge. Maybe 20% per hit would be more fair. Another issue this stage has is that in Ultimate specifically, there's no fire sound effect when anyone touches a danger zone, which is such a ludicrous oversight given how important they are to the stage and the fact that this was never fixed in the 3 years of post-launch support Ultimate got. But with that said, while this controversial cave may not be great, I certainly don't find it to be nearly as offensive as most believe. Number 62, Luigi's Mansion. This is absolutely solid as a more relaxed casual stage. There's no hazards here, but not every casual stage needs some crazy enemy or obstacle, and Mansion still keeps the fight interesting thanks to the destructible floors and see-through rooms. Even better are the smaller platforms that can float in and then vanish into thin air, which really help to add to the spooky atmosphere on this one. Having the mansion be rebuilt by ghosts once the whole thing is destroyed is a clever thematic way to restart the main gimmick's loop, and is one thing I wish a certain other destructible stage took notes on. Anyways, I'm glad this one has been haunting the stage select ever since its debut in Brawl. Number 61, Balloon Fight. I think this one gets too much hate, albeit to a much lesser extent than Great Cave Offensive. Among the 3 main stage hazards we have the Ball of Lightning, Flippers, and Fish, all of which can suddenly pop out at you without seemingly so much as a moment's notice, but the truth is that they're all fairly easy to anticipate if you know what to look for. The fish obviously only appears if you get close to the water, the lightning balls always spawn from the clouds after a bolt appears, and the flippers only ever appear at the same fixed point throughout the match. I like how there's 3 different versions of the layout, and without a doubt my favorite part of this stage is the return of the Blast Zone wrapping gimmick on a map that isn't Mario Bros. It's actually pretty fun when you don't have to deal with those obnoxious ceilings. Number 60, Norfair. This is just Brinstar but better, because not only does the lava rise from below, but there's also lava walls that can appear on either side of the map, and even little spritzes of liquid that can shower down from the background. But this stage's most iconic hazard is without a doubt the humongous wave of lava that washes in from behind and hits the entire screen, save for inside the safety hatch. Truth is, this safe chamber is only the most obvious of the many different options available to you to avoid this, as you can simply dodge or use ledge invincibility to your advantage. But fighting everyone for the pod is always a really good time, and hitting them ensures that they're not able to dodge the wave, so sometimes I'll just do that instead. Number 59, Suzaku Castle. Sakurai really took one look at the source material for this one and said, "Oh right, it's a normal fighting game, so all the stages are flat. Well shoot, I guess I'll just make something up then." And you know what? It didn't turn out half bad. Sure, it's just 4 simple platforms, but you won't really find a layout quite like this anywhere else in the game, because it's not every day you see a stage that's half walk-off and half not. Other neat little touches like the destructible background signs and the music getting faster at the end of the fight help to flesh out the locale's solemn and intense atmosphere. But where this one may have strayed from its flat heritage, one stage that never betrayed it is number 58, Final Destination. And by pure coincidence, the competitive scene's most famous stage ends up smack dab in the middle of the list. While FD is far too important to the game to be placed any lower here, it actually is held back by a few things. Firstly, the background may be gorgeous, but it can be quite distracting, although fortunately it's not quite Northern Cave levels of bad. Furthermore, even though it might seem like this is the best possible stage for competitive play, I don't think that's actually true upon closer inspection. Smash Bros. Is a platform fighter, and so I think legal stages with carefully positioned soft platforms are a bit superior to those without, considering they allow for more creative interactions and skill expression without actively disrupting the match. But that said, if there's one thing FD absolutely nails, it's conveying the apocalyptic stakes of the fights that take place here. And now that we're halfway through the tier list, I want to use this opportunity to briefly take stock of the ranking so far. As I mentioned before, poor Kid Icarus didn't get a single stage this high, while other franchises like Pikmin and WarioWare still haven't had any of their maps discussed yet. Should be interesting to see where some of those end up. Meanwhile, in terms of the Smash games, the 2 entries with the fewest remaining stages I haven't covered yet are Smash 64 with 2, and Ultimate with 5. But in all fairness, those 2 games had the fewest stages to start with as well, so it's not actually as bad for them as you might think. I have to say, it's gonna feel really nice to finally talk about the maps that I love here in the top 57. Smash Ultimate's characters and worlds have always brought me joy because of all the fun memories I have with this game and the series represented in it. So I decided to mix things up a bit by trying out my new format of ranking video on another game that I have a deep appreciation for. I want to thank you, truly, for watching this far. It really means a lot to me that you've given me this chance to share my thoughts with you, and I can't wait to see what your own favorites and least favorites are in the comments. Who knows, maybe I'll get lucky and meet another Great Cave Offensive apologist. But in any case, I'll have to wait for that, because it's on to the top half we go. Number 57, Yoshi's Story. Yeah, it's basically just another Battlefield clone, but the platforms are a bit more spread out, and the storybook art style is an interesting and enjoyable change of pace. But both of these differences pale in comparison to the GOAT Randall, another name for the little cloud that flies below the stage. He never changes directions or speeds up in the slightest, meaning that it's possible to time your offstage shenanigans in such a way that Randall saves you when you'd ordinarily fall to your doom, which can lead to some insanely hype moments like this.
The rest of the time he's been holding it.
So suffice to say, even though this one might be past its prime in the competitive scene, it still has everything from the old days that helps to set it apart from the other Battlefields. Number 56, Figure 8 Circuit. Good one on Brawl for taking one of the worst tracks in Mario Kart history and making it into a surprisingly good Smash stage. Its secret? The battle takes place right at the most chaotic part of the track, the intersection. That way, you have to deal with Shy Guys driving down the middle from the background, as well as ones that jump from the left ramp to the right. This is a good way to keep the entire stage in use, as well as making the state of the background race a significant factor that wily players will need to keep an eye on in order to maximize the amount of KOs they can get while minimizing their losses. It's also a really cool little detail how the Shy Guys aren't fully invincible and can actually be knocked off course with proper timing. Number 55, Tomodachi Life. The geometry here is certainly simple enough, but it makes for solid fights. The real claim to fame of this stage, though, are the background Miis, which are randomly pulled from your console. These guys are constantly up to a wide range of shenanigans, making it very fun to check in on them throughout the match. They really captured the zany and unpredictable nature of the source material with this map, so even if the layout isn't God's gift to stage design, the amount of laughs I get out of Tomodachi Life definitely warranted a spot in the top half. Number 54, Corneria. Absolutely one of the most iconic casual stages in the series, and for good reason. This stage is divided into 3 major areas: the front of the Great Fox, the back of the Great Fox, and everyone's favorite, the ship's laser cannon. Fortunately for Corneria, you can run up the ship's top wing from left to right, so the top 2 areas aren't quite as shut off from each other as they might seem at first glance. But who cares about that when you can fight on the laser cannon, baby! This is such an engaging high-risk area due to the cramped geometry making it extremely easy to get KO'd early, as well as the blaster itself occasionally shooting and dealing damage. The bad news is that the cannon's firepower was greatly defanged between Smash 4 and Ultimate, so it's not quite as excitingly deadly as in previous installments, and I had to bump it down a good deal in the ranking because of it. However, the area is overall still pretty dangerous to fight in, and the Arlings and Wolfens that appear from time to time are still every bit as enjoyable as before, so even if this Great Fox has seen better days, I don't want it to be retired just yet. Number 53, Find Me. I wish I got this stage in random more often than I do because it's pretty fun. The layout's just one big platform on the left and a smaller higher platform on the right, but this relatively simple arrangement allows for the stage's gimmicks to shine. First and foremost, we have the Dark Emperor, who influences the fight in many ways, such as buffing or debuffing a random player, causing one of the 2 platforms to temporarily sync off screen, and scariest of all, joining the fight directly. If you can defeat him, he'll reward his slayer with a temporary buff to all stats, which can really turn the tide of a match. Generally, I find this guy to be a superior stage boss to Yellow Devil, which is sad considering how much more press the latter gets. Yellow Devil appears very frequently and can sometimes become a burden given Wily Castle's small size, whereas Dark Emperor has a bigger stage to work with and plays a slightly more passive role by pulling strings from the background in addition to his more sporadic direct appearances in combat. There's also the Caged Mii in the upper left, which can make for a very funny cameo depending on who you get, very similar to Tomodachi Life. If you knock the Mii free, it'll even chase the Dark Emperor away, so yeah, the place has surprisingly good synergy across its different set pieces. And while you could certainly find Mii stages much better than this, it's respectable. Number 52, Battlefield. There have been many imitations of this one, but very few of them have been able to match or surpass the iconic Battlefield when it comes to the 3 soft platform competitive layout. There's a reason why the first ever footage shown off of Smash Ultimate began with close-ups of this place. It's a real looker, between the floating islands and vast waterfalls, all the while not being distracting in the slightest, unlike its sibling stage, Final Destination. Number 51.
Oh, no, 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 no.
I cannot tell you how funny it was to be there on the day that Small Battlefield was shadow dropped in an update. We were given absolutely zero prior notice about this, and it had been a joke in the community for such a long time before it actually existed. I mean, we have normal Battlefield, and we have big Battlefield, so why didn't we have Small Battlefield? The update really did feel like a huge troll, but in spite of that, this stage is no laughing matter in competitive play, as it isn't too wide like Battlefield or too empty like Final Destination. It has the best traits of them all, including Battlefield's gorgeous backdrop. Number 50, Umbra Clock Tower.
The symbol of the Umbran Way. No! There's no way that this could have been his plan.
Chill out, Rosa. 50's pretty good when there's 115 of these things. especially when this one's still basically the cursed template. But the thing is, Umbra Clock Tower avoids some of the most egregious pitfalls that make this archetype so obnoxious. For starters, this map is entirely true to the scene it's replicating, so it doesn't leave me wishing for a more authentic experience. As a matter of fact, the Falling Clock Tower is a very important scene in both of the first two games, so this was a very clever choice as it represents a wider range of the series' history without sacrificing accuracy. Furthermore, this stage is just very conceptually fascinating as a piece of a clock tower that just keeps falling for eternity, and this idea lends itself to an equally endlessly entertaining background. While some might say they believe this aspect of the stage is distracting, and I think that's certainly a valid perspective to have given all the hectic movement, I personally do not find that to be the case for myself, and I'll tell you why. Many of the angels and debris use muted colors to blend into the background better than the extremely bright colors that divert my attention in other stages. This play switches tones in a uniform fashion, either everything's beige in the human world or it's a muted purple in Purgatorio. One final positive this stage has is that the moving platforms that appear here are far more dynamic than in maps with similar layouts. Now then, it's high time I moved on to the next location. Number 49, Pokemon Stadium 1. Few stages are able to balance both casual and competitive merit quite as well as the Pokemon Stadiums. With Hazards on, the stage will change to resemble terrain based on one of 4 iconic Pokemon types, and with Hazards off, this is a solid 2-platform turning legal offering. If I had to rank the 4 type layouts from least favorite to favorite, Fire is last place because there not being burn damage here is extremely counterintuitive and lame. Grass is third because it's solid if not a bit run-of-the-mill. Rock is second because the big wall is a fun change of pace from the other more conservative types. And water is first because the windmill is fun and the water spout platforms are cute. Anyways, in a drastic change of pace from this entry, next we have number 48, Pokemon Stadium 2. It's close, but this one gets the slight edge over PS1 in my opinion, because 1 focuses more on transformations that shift the stage's geometry, while 2 leans more into altering the map's physics with the new type changes, and I find the latter approach to be more interesting. It also doesn't hurt that Stadium 2 is more competitively viable in Ultimate than its predecessor. I do prefer 1's background quite a bit though. I think the less crowded and more open air look for the spectator stands helps to give the foreground a bit of extra pop. Once more ranking the transitions from least favorite to favorite, we have Ground in last because it's both a retread of Rock and the only PS2 type change to not be physics based. Electric is third, the conveyor belts are cool, just not as cool to me as Ice in second, very slippery which can cause things to get chaotic very fast, and Flying in first because goofing around in the air for a bit can be extremely silly and fun. Still, as good as the Pokemon Stadiums are, I hope that next game they just pull a flat zone and give us a Pokemon Stadium X with all 8 type variants. I think that'd be a lot more fun than splitting it between 2 stages. But these are both still very novel and welcome additions to the stage roster. Number 46 and number 47, Prism Tower vs New Donk City Hall. No, this isn't a tie between the two of them, that would be lame. As I was script writing this video, it really struck me how conceptually similar these two stages are. So what I'm going to do for this segment is compare them directly, and the map that comes out on top will take the number 46 spot on the list, while the loser gets number 47. So pick your favorite and let me know down below which you prefer by putting either Team Prism or Team New Donk down below in the comments. I'm interested to see which one gets the popular vote. But anyways, here's my take on the matchup. Both are traveling stages that take players up a giant building one stop at a time, but the maps go about this task in different ways. Prism Tower is much more visually dynamic than New Donk, with a transition between floors often featuring wild camera shots that put the entirety of the surrounding area on full display. In fact, this map's final stop is a gorgeous bird's eye view of Lumiose City, something New Donk is sorely missing. Prism also features a day to night cycle to make the background pop even more and better represent the source material. However, City Hall stops generally have much more creative platform arrangements than Lumiose, even if they are just a bit more cramped. New Donk also spends longer at each floor before transitioning, due to the default casual match timer being raised from 2 minutes to 2.5 minutes in the jump from Smash 4 to Ultimate, and this allows it to get the most out of its better layouts. This stage also features the musician gimmick, in which 2 of the map's most common songs have instruments gradually added in as players pass the corresponding NPCs in the background. But where the Metro Kingdom drops the ball is in visual presentation. Not only is there no night version, even though Jump Up Superstar was originally performed at night on top of this very building, but the stage transitions are extremely flat, just carrying the player up to the next stop in a straight line. And this hardly gives you any sense of scale for how monumental this building is. So, all things considered, which stage is better? Well, to be frank, I was completely shocked by the outcome, because I went into this ranking fully expecting the other one to win by a landslide, but I have to give the victory to New Donk City Hall. Like I said at the start of the video, gameplay matters above all else, and I think City Hall's gameplay is strong enough to counteract the aforementioned presentation advantages that Lumiose has over it. So Prism Tower will be going at number 47, and New Donk City Hall will be taking number 46. Congrats to Team New Donk. Now back to our regularly scheduled ranking. Number 45, Brinstar Depths. Here's another example of, I guess I'll just make something up then. Because Kraid never actually appeared in a location even remotely resembling this in Metroid. Furthermore, Kraid himself doesn't look nearly as intimidating as he did back in Melee, which is unfortunate, but perhaps not as unfortunate as playing a character with poor recovery on this stage when it's turning. That's 3 strikes against it, so what exactly is this stage doing in top 50 instead of D tier? Well, I don't know what to tell you, man. The stage is fun. Kraid might not be quite as menacing as before, but he's still plenty scary, and definitely sells the visual spectacle backing the main gimmick of Brinstar Depths. Speaking of said gimmick, it's a total winner. The constantly shifting terrain makes this feel like at least a dozen stages in one, and it's very thrilling to try and keep up with all the changes. If there's one thing Metroid stages are always good at, it's their unsettling and alien atmosphere, and Depths perfectly uses this strength in tandem with a creative mechanic to cover up its weak points so sufficiently that it leaves me always glad to take this map for a spin. Number 44. Similarly to Umbra Clock Tower, this was a smart choice for a stage in Smash, considering it was playable in both of the first 2 Splatoon games as opposed to only one or the other. It features a surprisingly fun layout with its descending floors. The vertically focused gameplay it allows for is very unique, as it's even taller than something like Tomodachi Life. This one's a fun stage to play on, but it does feel like it's missing something, probably a gimmick. I don't know, maybe having a random special move from the Splatoon series collide with the stage from time to time? Like, imagine a Booyah Bomb drops down from above and causes an explosion, or the Kraken starts swimming near the bottom of the stage and does heavy knockback to anyone who touches it. But yeah, I do think people kind of sleep on Mori Towers. It really has the skeleton of a great casual map, and the Judd cameo and Splatfest variants help to keep it fresh as well. Number 43, Castle Siege. Here we have what is perhaps the textbook example of a transforming stage. It's always been one of the first ones to come to mind for me when I think of that archetype. The first phase begins with a pretty run-of-the-mill layout near the castle roof, then you're taken to a walk-off section inside the castle, and finally you end in what's likely the castle's depths on top of a precarious rock teetering above magma. The first phase is definitely the most visually pleasing as you get to watch the assault on the fortress, while the second phase has the most interesting gameplay courtesy of the destructible statues. The third phase is kinda mid, honestly. Like, such an intimidating location should be a good deal more dangerous than just lightly rocking back and forth. Maybe a dragon could come in and shoot fireballs sometimes, I don't know. Point is, you always gotta end the stage loop of transformation maps with something extra thrilling. Even the Paper Mario stage understood that much despite the final phase of that one being abysmal in practice. But all things considered, Castle Siege is a very good representation of many recurring locations throughout Fire Emblem's history, and it only falls a few places short of seizing the crown of the B tier. Number 42, Hyrule Castle. Long time no see, Smash 64. Good job on holding off for the past 30 or so ranking entries. Anyways, Hyrule Castle puts its decently large size to good use. There's nothing too remarkable on the left, but the center has a series of smaller platforms that lead up to the top blast zone and can make for some risky footholds, as they both put you in danger of being attacked from below for an early knockout, and allow you to pursue your own opponents more closely in order to close out stocks. The right side features the tent, a really cute little set piece that has all the fun of a Cave of Life without any of the monotony due to how small it is. It even obscures any characters inside of it, so oftentimes the mystery of not knowing what's going on until someone gets knocked out can be really exciting. Although not even that is as exciting as watching someone get spit out by the tornado. These things can kill super early and are really cool because they keep players moving throughout the whole stage instead of only staying in a select area. Hyrule Castle might be a living fossil at this point, but it paved the way for good stage design on larger maps in later installments thanks to its carefully crafted geometry and gimmicks. Number 41, New Pork City. Call it a sneak or whatever else you want, but I firmly believe this one aged like a fine wine. After all, 8-player Smash didn't even exist back in Brawl when this stage was first made, but now it's a great fit for the raised player count. With that said, I really want to know what was going through the team's head when they made New Pork City because it's just so strange. Like, they basically put the entire town in the background and the foreground is just a bunch of platforms with no relation to the city itself whatsoever. I'm not mad, just perplexed. But in spite of how seemingly random this stage's layout is from an artistic standpoint, it absolutely kills it in terms of gameplay design. Other big stages like Palutena's Temple struggle to find an answer to the question of how to keep KOs flowing at a normal pace despite there being so many more platforms that get in the way. Well, New Pork City's answer to this question is to make sure the platforms never even present that kind of problem in the first place, as much of the terrain on the top half is soft, allowing for fighters to easily be launched through it and ensuring they're not absolutely safe. The other answer this stage has to the big map's conundrum is the ultimate chimera, a terrifying hazard that can instantly knock out any fighters foolish enough to stand in its way, forcing them to either move out into the open or meet a gruesome end. Other highlights of the city include the swinging boat ride and the flying limousine, the latter of which can especially lead to some insane moments given how close to the bottom blast zone it flies. While I sure wouldn't call this a utopia, New Pork City is undoubtedly a fun 8-player stage. Number 40, Port Town Aerodive. Simply put, this map is scary. Port Town is pretty much the salty spittoon to Mario Circuit's Weenie Hut Jr. You thought getting hit by a Shy Guy in one of the Mario Kart tracks was rough? Well, the racing machines on Port Town are much faster and a lot less predictable. The few times they actually are telegraphed in advance, it's usually a downright terrifying shot of them zooming through some enormous stretch of track in mere seconds. It may not be the most fair map in the world, but the cars are far from oppressive, especially in Ultimate where they were toned down a good deal, and I like a stage with a bit of dramatic tension, something that Aerodive has in spades. There's also just something about the orange-tinted sky and sleek futuristic aesthetic of F-Zero GX that Smash Ultimate is able to perfectly enhance. Number 39, Skyloft. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, I love a good traveling stage, and Skyloft offers a wide assortment of diverse landmarks across the islands, such as the Bird's Nest, the Statue of the Goddess, the Roof of the Night Academy, etc. The one thing just barely holding Skyloft back from reaching that next level of greatness is how little time you actually spend at each location, because these phases end faster than Jeff Keighley ends the award acceptance speeches of developers at the Game Awards. Some of these layouts are fun, and I'd really like to spend more time on them than the stage allows. The good news is that the traveling mat that carries you around also has some variation in its own soft platform arrangements, so even if you can't stay anywhere for too long, there's still seldom a dull moment in Link's Skyward Home. But get ready for even fewer dull moments with this next batch of stages, because we're finally moving up the quality ladder once more. Here's all the stages that I believe have ascended to greatness. It's time for the A tier. Number 38, Gower Plain. Now this is a Xenoblade stage that effectively portrays the sprawling environments the series is beloved for. Plain may not come into its own until it has at least 6 players, but once you have a large crowd, this is another really enjoyable map with a good deal going on. Should you stay near the top and risk getting knocked around by a large group of opponents? Or should you stick to the smaller lower platforms which could be safer from foes, but are harder to navigate? Regardless of which you choose, the star of the show here will always be the giant pit in the dead center. Legend has it that if you spike someone down that thing, your name is forever engraved in the history of the Bionis. Metal Face is a fun boss, not because he has a bunch of unique attacks or anything like that, but because his quips are really amusing. However, as cool as this stage might be, you know what would have made it even better? If instead of Newport City's ultimate chimera, this stage had territorial Rotbart roam around and dish out one-hit kills. Number 37, Wrecking Crew. It's not every day you see a stage hit the trifecta of being faithful, unique, and enjoyable, but this entry has earned itself that elusive hat trick. Just like in the original game, you need to carefully strategize which bombs to set off in order to trap your enemies in the barrels, and the stage manages to always feel fresh considering the limitless combinations of walls, bombs, barrels, and ladders that can spawn on each of the destructible floors. I also like how they mix things up a bit by reimagining Wrecking Crew in beautiful HD instead of keeping it entirely graphically faithful similar to 75m or Hannonbow. Although, on the other hand, I'm also very glad they didn't take the remake approach with something like Flat Zone X because that would have looked extremely cursed. Number 36, Golden Plains. Now I don't want to hear anyone call this an auto-scroll stage. I mean, sure, it has auto-scroll sections that transition the layouts, but these are infrequent, brief, clearly telegraphed beforehand, and incredibly easy to navigate. They're not what defines Golden Plains. That would be the coin collecting gimmick, which has you race your foes to collect 100 coins, and once you do, you turn golden and extremely overpowered. Just like in New Super Mario Bros. 2, there's a lot of strategy here as to what the most efficient coin collecting method is, as the map provides you with a wide range of different options to rake in the dough. The golden transformation is also incredibly fun to use, and I just love stages that feature their own unique collectibles that function similarly to items. It's like I can still hear Pac-Maze's voice if I listen closely enough. But yeah, this level's worth its weight in gold. Number 35, Mute City SNES. As far as F-Zero stages go, this one's a good deal safer than Big Blue, while still being absolutely chaotic and a near one-to-one recreation of the original F-Zero game. Usually, ripping a stage straight from a game can have varying levels of success, with the worst cases being complete nightmares. But Mute City SNES represents the opposite end of that spectrum. All the hype and tension of an F-Zero race is still present here without coming at the expense of Smash's gameplay. I also love how not even the Blue Falcon is safe from getting taken out. It really keeps you guessing as to which machine will be the next to go. Number 34, Tortimer Island. As we get higher and higher on this list, you're going to start seeing more and more maps with a randomly generated aspect of their layout or mechanics, and there's a reason for that. It's because variety is the spice of life, and if you can have 4 or 5 consecutive games on a stage without it getting tedious, that's a huge plus in my eyes. Here at this tropical getaway from New Leaf, the actual content of the island, like the shape of the center landmass, the positioning of the trees, and the type of fruit they have, is entirely random. But as cool as the randomized island might be, it still plays second fiddle to Captain's Boat and the Shark, 2 gimmicks out in the sea that can turn the outcome of the match around on a dime should they appear at the most convenient or inconvenient moment possible. Number 33, Congo Falls. The end of that little mini streak of 3DS stages we just had is brought about by Donkey Kong's final entry of the list. And it really seems like the Abe learned his lesson, because Congo Falls features the best elements of other Donkey Kong Country stages while avoiding their pitfalls and adding a bit of its own flair to the mix. The cannon from Congo Jungle 64 makes a return, although it's not nearly as intrusive and annoying as before due to traversing a smaller portion of this map. Falls also features the claptraps from Jungle Japes, except this time they can finally shine without being bogged down by the rapids gimmick. Additional tiny footholds like the rock in the bottom right and the logs that pop in from time to time help to add even more excitement to the edges of the stage. If all that wasn't enough, Ultimate's take on Congo Falls is gorgeous, and not just purely in terms of aesthetics either. Seeing each of the logs shift under your weight does so much to boost the immersion of this environment, and when you put everything together, I could feel myself falling for this place to an extent that I never had before. Number 32, Arena Ferox. And now we move from DK's last entry to Fire Emblem's own final stage. We really are getting into rarefied air as we approach the top 30. Anyways, this is a great example of a premium transforming stage. There's 4 very unique phases, and they all stick around for a decent amount of time. Ranking the 4 layouts from least favorite to favorite, I'm putting the Pillar Ruins in last place, even though it is cool how you can use the hard platforms to score some stage spikes if you play your cards right. Third place is the statues. It's definitely the most simple of the quartet, but it's neat how you can break the statues, and overall it just feels like a nice callback to the interior of Castle Siege. Second place goes to the Mechanical Room, because the moving terrain it features is some of the most dynamic ground in all of Arena Ferox. First place is the Fort. Not only is it a refreshing take on Battlefield's trademark layout and one of the best looking phases of the stage, but the chain platforms can also be knocked around and even broken, giving players even more to adapt to on the fly. One final cool thing about this map is that it's an actual location originating from Awakening instead of some generic place that was made up for Smash, an unfortunate rarity among Fire Emblem stages. So yeah, I won't pass up any opportunities to exalt this one. Number 31, Great Bay. Here at Termina, there's quite a good deal to take in, from the 3 platforms on the left, to the giant turtle, to Tingle, and of course the race to stop the moon in the background. If you're cautious, the top platform can act as a ceiling to shield you from knockout hits, although this area's size and the water below help keep this place from being annoyingly safe. There's also the tiny rock on the far left, which teeters back and forth with your weight. Yeah, one thing about Melee's casual stage design in particular is that they really like throwing in these tiny little risky platforms at the edge of the map where you can just die instantly if you're not careful, and I think they're usually fun additions to the level that can make for nail-biting action. Getting back to Great Bay, it's also cool how the giant turtle on the right can duck out for a bit and then come back facing a new direction. I think that's a pretty good representation of Great Bay as a whole. There's no super in-your-face gimmick or hazard to watch out for, but there's a bunch of little quirks that you need to keep an eye on, and these come together to form a downright pleasant map that'll keep me entertained until the dawn of the final day. Number 30, Delfino Plaza. This is certainly one of the most memorable traveling stages in the game. What sets Isle Delfino apart from similar maps is the fact that it gives you significantly more time to enjoy the various stops. Some of the most interesting layouts include the stone spires and the row of umbrellas left of the Shine Gate. Most of the other areas aren't exactly breaking much new ground, but they don't really need to when the environment is so pretty, and none of these phases come even remotely close to being Garreg Mach levels of bad. It also helps that Delfino has very unique transition mats, especially the most iconic one with the arch on top. You don't really see layouts like that too often in Smash. I can't think of too many better vacation spots than this, except for number 29, Woohoo Island. I think it's very close between these 2 elite traveling stages. However, despite there being several areas in which Delfino holds a significant advantage over Woohoo, I ultimately prefer the island of Wii Sports fame for one simple reason. It has way better destinations. I mean, come on. Some of these stops like the boat ride and Volcano are cool enough to be their own individual maps. For all its aesthetics, Delfino just doesn't offer any experiences as thrilling as these. Additionally, even if the plaza does spend more time at each location than Woohoo, that's not to say the resort exactly stiffs you on destination time, especially not compared to something like Skyloft. But at the end of the day, both Delfino and Woohoo are exceptionally good traveling stages with their own unique areas they really excel at. Number 28, Windy Hill Zone. I can explain. I've put a good deal of thought into this, and I truly do believe the Sonic Lost World stage deserves to be this high on the list. And here's why. The curved gravity gimmick from Mario Galaxy makes a grand return here, only this time it is leagues more impactful due to the multitude of other gimmicks and platforms this stage offers. The springs in the bottom corners can be your best friend or worst enemy depending on if they decide to stay put, or maybe spin, or even exit Windy Hill altogether. You'd think they'd be just as annoying as something like Congo Jungle's Cannon, but due to how close to the stage the horizontal blast zones are, recovery doesn't actually come up quite as frequently as it does in other places, so the springs don't overstay their welcome. There's also the giant windmill, which is very fun to fool around on so long as you don't get carried away, literally. Not only is it a tremendous set piece, but the downward slope of the main stage's platform gives the windmill ample breathing room, so it can scoop up unsuspecting players without being super intrusive. Are you starting to notice a pattern here? Windy Hill's secret lies in its balance. You don't need to go out of your way bringing the fight to the edges of the map to have an interesting scuffle here, as the unique gravity and low top blast zone ensure a chaotic experience in neutral. But should you venture out toward the sides of the level, there's even more fun surprises in store. The only thing that would make this stage better is if Zavok was a playable character in Smash, then you could... Number 27, On It. Ness's hometown is a true classic that absolutely deserves to keep returning as often as it does. The center of the stage might seem the safest, but the drugstore sign can fall down and temporarily knock out the middle platforms. So then, your best bet is to just go down and fight on the street, right? Nope. Time for some vehicular manslaughter, baby! Your best chances of success here at On It are to either risk fighting on the upper edges of the map, or to stay in the middle and adapt to the state of the sign and cars on the fly. This map is also just really cozy. It looks nothing like where I grew up, and I was never the world's biggest fan of the Mother series, but On It's cartoony visual design makes it feel like a great hometown that's really easy to connect with. So yeah, this place is a smash hit in quite a few different ways. Number 26, Living Room. In terms of gameplay, the main attractions to be found here are the falling blocks and toys, which can form many different combinations to spice up the battle for a bit. However, as fun as this part of the fight is, a non-trivial chunk of the time spent in matches here is taken up by the stage just being a regular walk-off, so what gives? Well, the falling objects aren't the only randomized part of this stage, as you're also treated to the adorable antics of various dogs or sometimes even a cat. And I've always been an animal lover, so this little background show while the stage is between phases has always scored major points with me and undoubtedly helps Living Room fetch itself a much higher placement than it otherwise would have gotten. But really, what do I know about this stuff anyways? Let's go ask my dog Miyabi what her favorite Smash stage is, since she's clearly an expert on the subject. Hi Miyabi, what's your favorite stage? You like stages where you could run around a lot, huh? Pac-Land. Get out! Number 25, Fountain of Dreams. I've discussed stages that are carried by aesthetics quite a few times before, but this is just outrageous. It's one thing for a stage to look so incredibly faithful that it's almost indistinguishable from its source material, but it's something else entirely to reimagine and expand upon a location's visual design to the point where the map's new look is used in place of the original in the Level's Home series. That's right, Melee's take on Fountain of Dreams was such a hit that it was used to inspire the arena's appearance in Kirby's Nightmare in Dreamland, which released a year later. And every single ounce of the ethereal beauty that made Fountain so beloved in Melee was amplified perfectly with the graphical overhaul Ultimate gave this stage. Now, with how much I'm gassing this one up, I could understand if some of you aren't surprised it isn't even higher. But there are two things holding FOD back. Firstly, they never were able to get rid of every last tiny frame drop that occurs here, but luckily the vast majority of the cast doesn't suffer from these minuscule technical issues. So chances are you'll be just fine on the fountain so long as you don't eat garlic or make microgames. The other thing that gives me pause on this stage is the fact that yeah, it is a Battlefield clone in a game with basically every single variant of that stage in it. The water spurts pushing the platforms up and down is cool, but that alone is not winning this place any awards for uniqueness. But don't get it confused, this isn't just any Battlefield, it's the Battlefield. Compare any of the rest to FOD, and it's a total wash. Number 24, Spring Stadium. In a world where Ultimate's DLC stages too often try and fail at being tourney legal, it is immensely refreshing to see a modern stage bring a creative new gimmick to the table. The mechanic in question would be Spring Stadium's trampolines, which turn your jumps into powerful attacks if you leap off of them while they're glowing green. In casual play, this can greatly affect the way you interact with items and opponents. You can use the spring jump to help juggle, close out stocks, escape danger, reach collectibles quickly. The possibilities only continue to open up the more you mess around here. The ceiling strips get a lot of hate, but I firmly believe they're an inspired addition to this map. After all, the trampoline attacks make getting vertical knockouts the go-to strategy in this place, so having those high ceiling beams occasionally save you from the popular top blast zone is a very clever way to add depth and excitement to the experience. They're not all that different from the floating triangles on Peach's Castle 64, only the arms ones are a lot less random both visually and in terms of gameplay design. Sometimes I hear people complain we got this map instead of Ramen Bowl, and like, I get it because that's Min Min's home stage in ARMS, but do you really want another Green Hill Zone situation where the map is just one big bowl where everyone lives way too long? Also, I don't want people to think I hate stage cameos in Ultimate because I really don't. I only hate when they're touted as one of a stage's main draws instead of something with gameplay merit like interesting geometry or a cool gimmick. Here on Spring Stadium, the TV cameos are amazing because A, the stage isn't carried by them, and B, the screen features the full 15 character roster of ARMS, and it's just so nice to see every single one of them again. Honestly, it took a good deal of restraint not to give Spring Stadium first place just by virtue of it featuring my boy Helix. But as much as I love him with all my heart, and I was very glad to see ARMS actually deliver a banger stage to smash, that placement still would have been a huge stretch. Number 23, Temple. You know it, you love it, it's the original Mega Stage. For all the big maps we've gotten after Temple's debut in 2001, I still consider this to be the undisputed king of the archetype. There's a lot of terrain up above to play a fairly normal game of Smash Bros if that's what you're into, and in all honesty, this top half is underappreciated. On any other place, my attention would be instantly drawn to this cool stack of floating platforms on the right that encourages creative vertical play. But let's be real, the top half is not why you selected the stage. You want a piece of that sweet, sweet Hyrule Fight Club, baby! All roads lead down to this system of tunnels where you can either live forever or die in an instant. It's not very hard to see why this area of Temple is as beloved as it is. Every battle that takes place here is so spirited because everyone wants to be that guy who's still alive at 400, but no one wants to get knocked out through the left corridor. But what's even scarier than the left passageway is the isolated bottom stone, which ties back into what I was saying earlier about Melee being in love with the lone dangerous platform. This map has no hazards, no gimmicks, no quills, no pillows, and yet it proves that you don't really need any of that to make a fan favorite stage. You can reach all-star status with just expertly crafted geometry. I fully expected Temple to get Melee's top spot of the list, but no, another place managed to swoop in and steal that title. But don't let that diminish just how big of a W this map is. Number 22, Saffron City. Stand proud, Smash 64, you are strong. There's no shame in placing the overall lowest of the 6 games, when so many of your maps help to pave the way for tremendous stages in later installments. And nowhere is that more apparent than in what I consider to be hands down 64's best offering, Saffron City. The big Silphco building in the middle is where most of the action will take place, as it's the only platform that's consistently large enough to house multiple fighting characters. However, sparring on Silphco means you'll have to contend with occasional special appearances from several Gen 1 Pokemon. Most of them are hostile and a few can be incapacitated, so you have to study both the Pokemon and the current state of the battle before you decide your next move. This was the first ever stage to really give us the random appearance gimmick, which would later become a staple of Smash Bros., especially among the Pokemon stages. Here at Saffron, it's a really well thought out first go for this archetype. You can fight on the smaller buildings on either side if you want to, but there's not nearly as much room to operate there, so good luck. I also really like the propeller platforms that jerk up and down on the left. Not enough stages do creative things in terms of smaller terrain movement. It always boggles my mind how this one skipped every game between the first one and Ultimate, because when it comes to being the greatest 64 stage, not just in Ultimate, but in all of 64 as well, Saffron City, I choose you. Number 21? Looks like Pikmin finally decided to show up. Much like a real-life ecosystem, everything that happens here at the Garden of Hope has a ripple effect with implications for everything and everyone else in the surrounding area. It all starts with the 3 destructible items: the stick, the pot, and the bridge connecting the 2 landmasses that hold them. All 3 of these can be destroyed by fighters and will be gradually repaired by Pikmin over the course of the fight. But as always, the little guys have to watch out for their natural predators. Sometimes the peckish aristocrat will wander through this stage, posing a threat to all players as well as destroying the stick and pot on contact before this beast falls away. But the crab can also fall early if the bridge is destroyed, potentially protecting one of the 2 structures. Confused yet? Don't worry, it gets much more complicated. There's also the tin can lifts, which function like the scales in other stages. One goes down while the other goes up. This too is affected by the Aristocrab and, by extension, the state of the bridge. And finally, we have the Bulborb. No, it's not just for show, this guy really does have an impact on the fight. Do you know what he does? Well, when the Bulborb's in the area, the Pikmin will never appear to rebuild the map's structures out of fear of getting eaten. And by this point, you can imagine the butterfly effect this has on the rest of the level. Nowhere else in the 115 stage roster will you find a place with anywhere near this level of intricate synergy between its set pieces. And what's more, this take on the biome perfectly captures the beautiful but cruel harmony of nature that defines the Pikmin series, allowing Garden of Hope to sit comfortably as one of the apex predators of the A tier. Number 20, Yoshi's Island Melee. What an explosive stage this is. The ramps on the left and right are angled in such a perfect way that there's about a 50-50 chance that they'll save you from getting KO'd if you're knocked towards them. And this gamble happens very frequently due to this map's minuscule size. The right ramp is also a deadly walk-off that can lead to some really intense games of chicken. You can try to get some height and ignore the ramps by taking the fight up to the 2 snake block platforms above, but this leaves you vulnerable from below since the blocks can be disabled with a single attack. And of course, there's the pit in the center, which can open up to force even further pressure on the steep walk-off as well as the more open left side. This stage is the anti-75 meter. It's always fun, regardless of if you have as few as 2 players or as many as 8. In fact, it's so much fun that I consider it to be the superstar of Melee's stage catalog in Ultimate. And speaking of superstars, we're getting so high on this list that the levels are no longer just impressively well made. They've graduated to become downright admirable. Any map past this point is one that I wholeheartedly consider to be amazing, so let's unpack the outstanding stages of Ultimate as we explore the S tier. Mega Man, what do you think you're doing aura farming here? You have to have a stage that's at the same tier or higher than the one you're repping the card for, and we've already established that Wily Castle is not S tier material. Maybe next game, buddy. Go on now. Shoo, don't let the door hit you on the way out. Okay, now can we get someone else in here for the S tier card? Anyone? Alright, now we're talking. Just stand here and action. Number 19, Boxing Ring. This will always be the final destination of casual Smash Bros to me, and it deserves to come back in every future installment in the series. It may be called the Boxing Ring, but this map has always played a bit more like WWE, with how you can fight basically anywhere you want. The ring and the entrances on either side are the two most obvious areas, but you can also use the ring's ropes to bounce up and fight on the lighting fixture above. This is a really clever way to incentivize not just standing next to either blast zone and fishing for something like a back throw the whole game. When you're up fighting on the lights, getting vertical KOs is exceptionally easy. And what's more, if the lights take enough damage, they can come crashing down and smack anyone standing in the center, which is again, very absurd in a manner similar to TV wrestling. If there's any stage that I'm glad doesn't take itself too seriously, this is the one. Not only does Boxing Ring kill it in terms of gameplay design, but the atmosphere is fine-tuned to a pitch that maximizes the thrill of battle. You've got the Jumbotron with the character nicknames in the background, the LED scroll that changes accordingly based on the state of the match, smoke machines erupting whenever someone gets knocked out, and a visual filter that makes everyone seem just a bit more cartoony like in Little Mac's home series. That's not to mention the fact that there's both a Punch-Out and Smash Bros version of this map. This one truly is a masterclass in immersion and hype generation, and I didn't even need a 10 count to decide on it being a champion stage. Number 18, Yoshi's Island Brawl. You simply cannot find a more cozy and pleasant stage in Smash Bros than this. I don't care that this map has a tenuous at best relationship with Ultimate's competitive scene. It's absolutely flawless for low stakes 1v1s on the couch with friends. Everything looks just so adorable and nostalgic in the pastel art style of Yoshi's Island, and the lightly swaying platform only helps to further increase the immaculately soft feel. Blargwitch can save you on occasion, and Fly Guys can drop food items, helping to add just a tiny bit of intrigue to an otherwise relaxing locale. All this, and I haven't even mentioned the best part yet, that of course being the changing seasons. Each one is reminiscent of different levels from the original game, and they're all so incredibly full of life. The obstacle course remix that often plays here changes versions when the stage switches from summer to fall or from winter to spring. Ranking the aesthetics of the 4 seasons of this map from my least favorite to favorite, I'd say spring is last, then winter in third, summer in second, and fall takes first place. I know, that just might be the most controversial thing I've said in this entire video, but it had to be said. I'm aware that lately the Smash community hasn't exactly been a safe place for fans of the spring variant of Brawl Yoshi's Island, but those fans did know what they were getting into when they signed up for this. The Chinese water torture wasn't entirely unwarranted if you ask me. However, this level is fantastic no matter what season it's on, and if this stage ranking were based on vibes alone, then it would be a shoo-in for top 5. And I have just been informed that I will be shot via firing squad if I make an egg pun for the closing line here, so let's just move on to number 17, Kalos Pokemon League. Here we have the pinnacle of the Pokemon stage archetype that Saffron started all the way back in '64. At the League, not only are there 4 different rooms for 4 different Pokemon types, but the thing that really pushes this stage up to that next echelon of excitement are the rare legendary chambers. But perhaps I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start with ranking the 4 regular versions, and I'm giving last place to Water. Even though there's nothing really wrong with it, the Water Current is cool, I just like the other 3 better. Third is the Fire Chamber. The flames can be pretty deadly if you're not careful, and I think they're positioned well on the stage. Dragon takes second place. It's definitely the best looking of the bunch with that imposing statue, and plus this place has Garchomp, only one of the best Pokemon of all time. But first place belongs to Steel. Not only can the swords damage you and you have the ability to push them even further into the ground, but the metal pool is so unique compared to the rest of the league's gimmicks, and it has really great synergy with the 2 swords. Now then, ranking the legendary chambers, last is Registeel's room because all that happens is the swords spin around and the metal pool doesn't even appear anymore, so it's basically a downgrade. Third is Ho-Oh's fire floor. It's just the same effect as the normal version, but bigger now. Wow. Manafi's water room takes second place. The giant whirlpool is not to be taken lightly. And first is of course Rayquaza's dragon floor because A, this is a reference to the Pokemon's appearance as a boss in Subspace Emissary. B, it's one of the most unique room changes of all the legendary variants. And C, Rayquaza is just overall one of my favorite legendary Pokemon. But as I said before, it's the fact that Kalos has so much variety in what can happen on it that makes it so incredible. And all of the chambers do a stellar job at representing what makes each Pokemon type special. And that's not even getting into how stunning this place looks. If you pick this to be your favorite map in Ultimate, I don't even have to X why you picked such a banger. It's a truly elite stage. Number 16, Distant Planet. Great though Garden of Hope may be, I do consider it to be the weaker of the two Pikmin locations in Smash. This stage is very reminiscent of competition for shelter within nature and the Pikmin series, as the Smash characters here are locked into a constant struggle for a safe area to battle. The slope on the left is a fine enough place to rest, just so long as the rain doesn't come and wash you away. The leaf platforms in the center are so springy that enough weight can make them sink down onto the vines below, so they're a bit too unruly to properly utilize and can leave you exposed to characters lurking beneath if you're not careful. That only leaves the right side of the stage, which is where one of my favorite events in the entire game can happen. You can get eaten by a Bulborb! And the map does everything it can to try and coax you into fighting on the darn thing too because of how much room for combat there is up on his back. Just be really careful because you can get eaten by a Bulborb! That's not even getting into how amazing it feels to successfully knock someone into his mouth when he opens it, and then you get to watch them
Get eaten by a Bulborb.
Absolutely a top 3 hazard in the game, no questions asked. Add in the onion and pellet gimmick and yeah, this is an excellent stage with a lot of great parts that come together to form an even better whole, not unlike Olimar's giant team of Pikmin in the original games. In fact, you know what? If you don't like this one, you can... Number 15, Super Mario Maker. To say that the Mario Maker stage was a difficult one to rank would be an understatement. I mean, the entire thing is randomly generated. How the heck am I supposed to position this thing in the tier list when it theoretically has infinite potential to be good or bad? Well, the good news for me was that Mario Maker in theory and Mario Maker in practice turned out to be two completely different beasts. While it is true that there's a virtually limitless number of combinations this stage can use when making a layout, it still adheres to some crucial basic rules, like almost always either being a walk-off or a floating island. There's something akin to a built-in quality checker when each map is made, so even if you'll get the occasional dud, more often than not the random stage will be a total banger. Now that that's settled, the rest of the reasoning behind why I placed Mario Maker so high should be fairly obvious by this point in the video. Again, it is a stage with virtually endless replayability in the hands of the guy who won't shut up about variety being the spice of life. You could have an entire couch play session with friends while only selecting Mario Maker and you probably wouldn't get tired of it. And that's not even solely because of the infinite layout. The game style switching between the 4 different Mario games is extremely novel as well. There's a reason why this is the only map in the series' history to have its own reveal trailer completely independent of any new character announcement. Eat your heart out, Minecraft world. This is how you convey endless possibilities in Smash. Number 14, WarioWare Incorporated. Nowhere else will you find such a perfect intersection between the gameplay of Smash Bros. And the experience of a stage's source material. Here at WarioWare Inc., every now and then you'll be thrust headfirst into a microgame. Now you can choose to ignore these entirely, but those who succeed at the challenges are rewarded with a major buff like a size increase or invincibility. To stay at the top of the pack, you need to be able to quickly react and adapt to the microgames, just like in the original series. Many of these short tests are taken directly from the WarioWare games, but even the ones that aren't are still brimming with the same simplicity, goofiness, and charm that make the rest so appealing. Additionally, not only is there a decent pool of games for the stage to choose from, but even within many of the specific challenges, there's a solid amount of variety as to how the event can play out. If you hate losing as much as Wario does, then just pick this stage, because you'll have so much fun here that you'll feel like a winner regardless of the fight's outcome. Number 13, Gerudo Valley. Okay, we're about 2 hours in now. I think it's safe for me to talk about liking walk-offs. Some people will try to tell you that walk-offs are inherently a bad thing in stage design, but that just isn't true. They're only objectively bad in competitive play, where they're universally banned for good reason. But in casual matches, they can create a fight dynamic that is very unique compared to the usual fare on maps with edges. The important thing for walk-off stages, though, is that the place has something else interesting going on in the center in order to ensure that the entire map sees usage, and Gerudo Valley's bridge is a perfect example of a great interactive stage element in Ultimate. It can break over time, but it's also impacted by fighters attacking, jumping, and even walking on it. And once the rickety thing finally snaps, the pit in the center opens for business while Kome and Kotake inflict one half of the stage with their magic. One of the things that really impresses me about the valley is how much there is actually going on inside of the pit itself. They could have just as easily made it an empty hole and this gimmick still would have been great, but it's the fact that there are tiny sticks and spikes down there that helps to make the chasm feel even more dynamic and intense. The attacks from Kome and Kotake are also a fun way this stage continues to reposition fighters and keep them on their toes. Combine all of this with the distinct arid atmosphere and you have the perfect recipe for a stage that I'm always willing to give the time of day. Number 12, Frigate Orpheon. I was a bit sad that this one wasn't quite able to squeeze into the top 10, because it's absolutely sensational in a way that not many other stages are. The focal point here is obviously the wriggling Parasite Queen, but the dark lighting and glowing platforms help to further sell the trademark eerie aura that the Metroid maps are known for. Additionally, while oftentimes a stage's gimmicks exist to enhance the gameplay experience of that level, Orpheon instead uses its unique mechanics to add credibility to the unstable and unsettling atmosphere festering within the ship. Every now and then, the stage will flip 180 degrees, or the lights will shut off, and while these two gimmicks are both interesting in of themselves, it's the visual and auditory telegraphs for these mechanics like the spinning spotlights and blaring sirens that make Frigate Orpheon feel that much more unsafe. But as we've established earlier in the video, atmosphere alone cannot get you that high on this list. With that said, this stage is more than able to back up its ambiance with two surprisingly unique layouts. The first phase in particular, with the right side floating up to be level with the left side, and then floating down to reveal a wall, is a very distinct and satisfying geometrical arrangement that makes me wish more small casual stages would be willing to experiment in this same vein. There's also the giant platforms that float in on either side of the map to help shake up the encounter even more. This is a prime offering from Brawl, the best Metroid stage in all of Smash, and a horrific triumph of level design that deserves all the credit in the world. Number 11, Mushroom Kingdom U. What makes this map so special is how it's able to juggle two different stage archetypes at once and use their combined strengths to its advantage. You have stages that shift into different locations mid-match like Castle Siege, and you've got stages in which random gimmick occurrences happen from time to time like Norfair. Mushroom Kingdom U does both of these at the same time, with Kamek flying by to shift the location while other various platforms and hazards pop in regardless of the current layout. As such, there's an enormous pool of combinations between the different locales and mechanics. Each of these represents a different level theme from the original game, leading to an experience that feels comprehensive and not half-baked. As a huge fan of desert levels, it's a real shame that Layer Cake Desert was one of the only worlds to not get represented in any capacity. But hey, I've still got Gerudo Valley in the top 15, which is kinda close, I guess. Perhaps the most unique aspect of Mushroom Kingdom U is Nabbit, who will run around and try to kidnap players, dragging them up past the top blast zone for a kill unless they mash fast enough to escape. This is such a fun and natural way to work him into the stage, and I'm really glad they went the extra mile by adding him in. Thank goodness he isn't completely invincible like he is in New Super Luigi U though. That would be insanely annoying. Put everything together and you have a downright delightful Smash Bros. Experience that's an excellent fit for extended casual matches, so it absolutely had such a high placement in the bag. Now it's time for the top 10, starting with... This isn't just any battlefield, it's the battlefield. Compare any of the rest to FOD, and it's a total wash. Yeah, but I meant like of the ones directly competing for Battlefield's viability, and the Persona stage is pretty clearly trying to be its own more casual kind of thing instead. So let me rephrase what I said earlier. This right here, this is the greatest variation of Battlefield that has ever existed or will ever exist, competitive or casual, with absolutely no doubt in my mind whatsoever. Now that that's cleared up, let's start over. Number 10, Mementos. I like to think of this stage as Battlefield Shadow's self, because it bears many similarities to the iconic stage, but it's noticeably off in several ways, like being larger, having a slope in the middle, the platform on the right being too high, etc. However, it's those very distortions that make the Memento stage come alive in ways that the original Battlefield never could. The differently shaped walls that appear at the top or sides of the map force player adaptation and can make for some insane combos or last-minute saves. Adding on to the fun is the platform on the right side that stops by from time to time, offering an additional foothold for its duration. These are major gimmicks that really shake up the gameplay in ways that other Battlefield clones often shy away from. But of course, Mementos' greatest strength is its trademark stylization pulled from Persona 5, which makes for a vibrant and ever-changing treat for the eyes. Furthermore, you'll see cameos from the various Phantom Thieves, and the music you select has a huge impact on the scenery as well. Here, I'll let this very well-paced and not at all awkward moment from the trailer explain it to you.
Mementos has a little secret.
Isn't its entire existence a secret?
The bass color changes depending on the music.
Absolute cinema. But corny trailer aside, this really is a great way to reference the other Persona games. And it's not just the base color. Each of the 3 games has its own distinct symbols and quirks incorporated into the designs. What more could you really ask for than a stage that looks this fresh and creates such clean and memorable matches? If you find yourself upset with Mementos, it might be time for a change of heart. Why does it feel like I'm forgetting something? Oh right, the trains! I absolutely love it when someone gets hit by one of these things. They even gave it that cinematic slow motion effect if there's a head-on collision. Such an inspiring locomotive, showing us all what it means to be a great stage hazard. Ugh, that's the Spirit Train.
Say that again?
Number 9, Spirit Train. So do you remember all the way back in low B tier when I was talking about how Big Blue could have been a lot better if it just had consistent terrain and more going on? Well, Spirit Train is basically what you get if Big Blue gave me everything I wanted and far, far more than that. Despite all the shenanigans that occur on this track, the train itself is a constant, so no matter what happens, you usually have at least a somewhat stable place to fight. But this is no simple journey, as the rear carriage is constantly being swapped out for other compartments, and it's always exciting to see how this impacts the next couple exchanges of the fight. There's also the armored cars that can push the Spirit Train in either direction, spicing things up even more. And all bets are off once the Dark Train appears. You'd better pray it's a dud. What makes this stage top 10 material is how everything from the subtle car changes to the frightening bomb scares feels momentous and dramatic when it happens in the middle of a breakneck train voyage. After all, the slightest miscalculation from a fighter here could spell their doom in the blink of an eye. There's also something of a nostalgic beauty to this map, and I'm not even talking solely about spirit tracks. I just think steam engines are really neat looking. I don't find it easy to put into words, but there's just this sort of resolute and unbreakable vibe I get from them. Maybe it's because I subconsciously linked them to stubborn childhood heroes like Thomas and the little engine that could. But unlike the Spirit Train, I'm getting way off track. So let's bid this terrific train farewell as we reach our next stop, number 8, Midgar. Oh no. This is the greatest variation of Battlefield that has ever existed or will ever exist, competitive or casual, with absolutely no doubt in my mind whatsoever. I have made a severe and continuous lapse in my judgment. Now, you know what? I'm not going to even bother because there's no coming back from that one. So let me just skip to the part where I explain why I believe Midgar has phenomenal design that's worthy of such a high placement. Similar to Mementos, Midgar is more of a spoof of Battlefield than an imitation played completely straight. You see, Battlefield is such an iconic stage that it makes for the perfect familiar baseline that any player can easily understand. But that's where the summon materia comes in. Each of the 5 monsters that can be summoned unleashes an attack so powerful that it not only damages enemy players, it even affects the map itself. So when that iconic tri-platform layout you've come to know and love is being shaken up in catastrophic ways like getting flooded or incinerated, it feels all the more engaging. Furthermore, making the player who collects the materia immune to the summon was such a great decision. It adds a whole new layer of strategy to the battles here, like an entirely new genre of assist trophy has been added to the mix. But you all know the drill by now, it's time to rank the 5 monsters. Last place is Bahamut Zero. The beam this thing fires is insanely powerful, and he's certainly one of the summons you want to get the most in a fight. But the blast doesn't actually influence the stage itself, it's just a run-of-the-mill big laser that you've seen elsewhere in Smash, like with the Zero Laser or Daybreak, so it loses points for lack of creativity. 4th place is Leviathan. It's really cool getting to see Battlefield become a water stage for a brief moment, and Leviathan himself has one of my favorite designs of the 5 creatures. 3rd is Ramu. His entrance goes unnecessarily hard, and I love watching the 3 platforms shift around erratically, even if it's not the strongest summon out there. Ifrit gets 2nd place. There's many different angles from which the Fire Blast can strike the stage's main body, making this easily one of the most dynamic attacks of the group. But as cool as the other 4 may be, 1st place is unquestionably Odin. There's 3 phases to his Zantetsuken. First, there's the strike itself, which deals massive damage and usually KOs anyone dumb enough to get hit by his blade. After that, the stage stays split down the center for a bit, making for some prime spike potential. I adore the layout while Midgar's cut in half. It's so much more dangerous, especially with the looming threat of the 3rd and final phase, the stage reverting and squashing whoever's left in the gap. Man, I love Odin. He's got it all. A really cinematic but clearly telegraphed attack, and a profoundly enjoyable effect on the map itself. I'd even go as far as to say that Odin is my 2nd favorite stage hazard in the entire game. What's number 1, you ask? Don't worry, we'll get there soon enough. But until then, I want you to know that Midgar breaks the limits of tri-platform fun. Number 7? It seems we finally reached the part of the ranking where I have to somehow justify my top place stage in S tier and my 7th favorite map overall being Lilat Cruise Woohoo Island Edition. Because if we're being real, that's essentially what Pilot Wings is. You spend the entire match fighting on top of a vehicle that takes you on a scenic tour. Only with Pilot Wings, I find the journey to be much more exhilarating. You start out on the red biplane traveling above the classic runway, and you can fight on top of the wings or on either side of the cockpit. Since the top of the wings are soft, you have a lot of freedom of mobility in the first phase, which is exceptionally welcome considering how much these planes like to twist and turn. Then after a while, you're dropped off on the yellow monoplane, which is mostly just a shaking flat platform, but the second plane features the far better scenery, as you're taken on a stunning trip through the island of Woohoo. And you have to be especially careful during this segment, as the island's terrain can actually catch you and knock you out if you're too close as the plane passes by it. This is all the more true if you decide to risk fighting on the plane's small rotors beneath the main platform. These little footholds are very reminiscent of Melee's little danger zones I mentioned earlier. It's nice to see them return in more modern stages from time to time. Pilot Wings is equal measures relaxing and terrifying, comfortable and dangerous, welcoming and deadly. It's a consistently thrilling joyride both in its premise and its context, and that's precisely why it flies high above every other map in Ultimate except for 6. We've had a lot of fun exploring what I think makes a Smash stage incredible, but these final 6 maps go beyond even that. They're not just places where you go to have a fun match, they're what I consider to be enjoyment in its purest form. And as per tradition, they all get to keep their original music during their reviews. So join me now as we explore the pinnacle of Smash stage design. I give you the P tier. Among the hectic and complex entries in this top tier of Smash stages, it turns out that Ultimate's best new offering was able to knock my socks off with just one simple but expertly crafted mechanic. Here at the King of Fighters Stadium, the left and right blast zones are usually protected by invisible walls, causing fighters to rebound off of them. However, if you're launched hard enough, you'll be sent flying through the glass with a crispy zoom-in effect and KO'd like on a regular stage. More than any of the other maps based on traditional fighting games, I feel like this one is able to flawlessly capture that intersection between the gameplay of the source material and that of Smash. Nothing's more satisfying than watching a wall combo convert into such a pretty finisher. Speaking of which, KOF Stadium is quite a sight to behold. There's a lot of visual flair added to the fight here, similar to Boxing Ring. One of the most impressive aspects of this stage is the sheer number of cameo characters that can line the background, and the music you select in the fight changes who appears. There's not a lot more to say about this one. It's very straightforward, but an absolute blast every single time. In fact, I've watched and participated in casual tourneys that exclusively use this stage. It's just that exciting and endlessly replayable. You're definitely making a fatal mistake if you haven't given this one a shot lately. It's a masterpiece.
Anything you can dream about here, you can make.
Looks can be deceiving. This is among the most graphically unimpressive places in the game, but don't let that fool you for an instant. Among all the stages in Ultimate that randomly select from an assortment of wacky transformations, none of them have a larger pool to draw from or a more tasteful sense of timing than PictoChat 2. Every sketch appears quickly and only lasts a few seconds before the stage returns to its default state akin to Final Destination. Just like with a blank piece of paper, the possibilities on this stage are virtually limitless. With as many as 26 drawings, you'll usually only see about 5 or 6 per match, and some sketches like the clock even have some variety in where they're placed on the stage, so the replayability factor on this one is absolutely bonkers. The drawings come and go very rapidly too, making the map a good test of the player's adaptability and quick thinking. Additionally, it's really neat how many of the drawings are references to other properties and even other stages that appear in Ultimate, which gives it unique status as a sort of crossover map. Now, I'm not going to be ranking all 26 doodle transformations because I was recently hit by a wave of self-awareness and realized that's only something that a total dweeb would do. Come on, you know we're way too deep into this for that sort of thing. As amazing as PictoChat 2 is, there's a very simple way it could have been made even better. Bring back PictoChat 1 from Brawl and combine it with this stage, making PictoChat X with all 52 possible drawings. If that actually happens, it could easily end up being number 1 if I do a Smash 6 stage ranking. But that's just a hypothetical. And the reality of PictoChat 2 and Ultimate is still incredible. It will never cease to amaze me just how easily this place can draw me in.
I couldn't help but notice that you are a gamer, and I noticed that you also killed your mother.
Not too long ago, I mentioned how Bulwarb and Odin were my third and second favorite stage hazards respectively, leaving my number 1 spot a mystery. So who's the biggest, baddest, and most impressive of them all? It turns out that it's your mom. And I don't even mean that as some sort of outdated diss, it's the truth. The lore behind the gamer stage in Smash is that the young 9-Volt is up playing video games past his bedtime, so he has to be careful to hide under his covers to avoid the gaze of his mother 5-Volt or else he'll be found out. It sounds simple enough, but there's a wide assortment of locations she can check the room from as well as fake outs to get you to put your guard up too early. The Smash stage plays by similar rules as the WarioWare minigame, only now you need to hide behind various bedroom objects to avoid her line of sight. Not only is there a ton of variety in the many set pieces that act as cover on this map, but 5V retains her impressively vast supply of tricks and fake-outs from the original game. On some occasions, Gamer will even be loaded in with a more rare check spot for 5V like the sketchbook or gamepad. It really is crazy just how elaborate her tactics can get. Like, did you even have any idea she could do something like this? I hope you're starting to see why I consider this map to be so elite by this point. All of my boxes have been checked several times over. Uniqueness of gameplay? 5V's game of cat and mouse has that more than covered. Aesthetics? No other level has such a memorable tone that blends horror and goofiness. Authenticity to the source material? Please, it's literally a perfect recreation of the minigame for the plat fighter genre. And going beyond even all of that, Gamer serves as such a charming dramatization of an experience that a lot of kids who grew up on handhelds like the PS Vita, DS, and Switch can relate to. A stressful time where every last bump of the night could spell your doom, but dang it, you've made it closer to beating Eggman than ever before, so there's no turning back now. What more even is there to say about Gamer? It's good by virtually every conceivable metric that's even remotely relevant to this ranking. What, you're still not convinced this map is peak? Alright, fine. Good thing I saved my best reason for last. 5V is hot.
A nice deep freeze.
Full disclosure, I hardly know where to begin with this one. I don't think there's another stage in the game with so much going on in such a short span of time, so I'm going to try and speedrun the overview so I can give you an impression of everything Summit has to offer while also showing you just how zany this map is. You ready? Here goes. You start at the very top of the mountain. Now you might take a look at this layout and immediately think there's a huge cave of life on the lower level, but that actually isn't the case for a multitude of reasons. First and foremost, the ground is extremely slippery due to the ice affecting every single character's traction, with the sole exception of the ice climbers. The hinge platform on the left can collapse and the ice slope on the right can be temporarily broken with attacks. An icicle will also sometimes drop down from the center cave, dealing damage to anyone it hits on the way down. 10 special vegetables from the original game appear as food items and always spawn in the same order as Ice Climber. Cloud platforms scroll by above and below during the first phase, mimicking the bonus stage from the original game. After a while, the top of the peak will fall off, sending the players plummeting down. The stage behaves similarly to vehicle maps like Spirit Train while it's in this state, as touching either side of the ground beneath the dislodged peak will carry you towards the right. During the descent, gravity is slightly reduced, making characters just the tiniest smidge more floaty. Eventually, the mountain will finally land with a splash in the icy waters below, marking the start of the third and final phase of Summit. This acts is more comparable to something like Tortimer Island and similar water stages. Ice platforms pass by from time to time, but standing on them is risky due to the fact that they can sink under your own weight, as well as the threat of the fish lurking nearby. And yes, it's the same fish as on the balloon fight stage, just with a 3D redesign this time around. He can still drag players down to the depths for a KO, but his larger size allows him to also ram into characters to hurt them directly. Meanwhile, the polar bear that paces on top of the stage will sometimes jump so hard that it will cause Summit to briefly dip further into the icy waves. After some more time in the water, upwards pointing arrows will appear that signal the mountain rising once more, starting the cycle over from the beginning. So yeah, Summit has a ton going on, and it can be downright maddening to deal with during matches, but therein lies this stage's true beauty. No other map in this game is able to succeed at so many different stage genres in just a single match. This level constantly challenges players to work around harsh environments in a desperate bid for survival. It's like the same idea as the Pikmin stages, but intensified tenfold. While no one hazard or gimmick here is as cool as 5V or Odin, Summit does feature a wide array of set pieces that harmonize beautifully to form an unforgiving but thrilling whole. Nothing besides this one fills me with the same adrenaline and vigor as a roller coaster ride, and when it's accompanied by such a cinematic and natural progression from one killer scene to the next, it becomes all too clear to me why this stage's Spanish name literally translates to The Peak. I'll gladly let Summit take bronze. If there's anything cooler than being cool, it's ice cold. Magican is a dream that you never want to wake up from. It's absolutely spellbinding, and while I believe that fellow Earthbound Stage 4 side might have the best aesthetics in the game, this one has the best atmosphere. The foreground is really pretty with the pink clouds, and the backdrop is simply mesmerizing. Seriously, comparing this to its original appearance in Smash 3DS is night and day. But even back then, Magic Hand still found ways to subtly instill its themes of fantasy and familiarity through its refreshingly unorthodox level design. If I could describe this map's unique approach to crafting a surreal yet enjoyable experience in just 2 words, I'd say, anything goes. There are 5 different giant objects that can spawn on the left and center of the stage, each with their own unique properties. Trees pop up and act as stationary soft platforms. Mobile sprats do the same thing, but also walk around. The Sky Runner hangs above the stage and is completely solid. Tomatoes act as hard but destructible platforms that can pass through the clouds, and the octopus statues are the same as the tomatoes, except indestructible. Most of these items don't actually show up in this place during the first 2 Mother games, but considering they're all things that Ness has encountered throughout his journey and Magican exists within his mind, they're all not only fair game to appear here, but also a clever way to further reinforce the subconscious nature of this location. This also applies to Dungeon Man, who wanders back and forth across the bottom blast zone from time to time, and of course the same is true for the giant rips in the sky that show off various scenes from Mother 1 and 2. However, Magican's best known gimmick is actually one that does originate from the place this stage is based on, so let's talk about the Flying Man. I know he's not exactly everyone's cup of tea due to how aggressive he can be, but personally I always enjoyed his presence, regardless of if I was able to recruit him before my opponent did or not. Sakurai was originally planning on making him 3D, but I'm glad they stuck with his original sprite form instead. It really helps him to stand out when fighting alongside Smash's playable characters. When you put everything together, matches played on Magican tend to be unpredictable and imbalanced, and I mean that with the most positive connotation possible. Either someone's taking on the Flying Man, or someone's hiding on Dungeon Man, or a mobile sprat swooped up an important item right before you could get it. But I never find it unfun, because when the entire stage is broken, none of it is. This place takes overpowered allies and annoying obstacles and transforms them into enjoyable level elements by synergizing the set pieces together, as well as affording players much greater freedom of movement due to the map's semi-soft main cloud body, which can be passed through from below but not from above. Anything goes, just like how you can be whatever you want inside of your imagination, or how your memory determines how people, places, and experiences that are long gone from your life have been immortalized. And at the end of the day, this might just be one of over 100 different backdrops for a crossover children's action game, but I feel no shame in admitting that I find this stage to be profoundly beautiful, not just in its appearance or even in its gameplay design, but in what it stands for. This level is a testament to free will and the accumulation of its consequences inside of human beings. After all, it's the things that stick with you that will make you stick out, and this map understands that on quite a few different levels. Long story short, this is the perfect Smash Bros. Stage. There's nothing that its magic can't do. Well, maybe there is one thing, and that's be a better stage than...
Swap, 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 me hearty swap!
This isn't exactly the craziest number 1 pick in the world. Take a look at most people's top 10 lists, and there's a solid chance you'll see pirate ships somewhere in there. But if anything, that just goes to show you how easy it is to love this place. There's no deep philosophical reason why this stage is good, it's just a really fun Smash Bros. Map, and surprise surprise, that's all you really need to win fans over. Sure, Gamer has the best hazard, Summit is the most thrilling, and Magican has the best atmosphere, but Pirate Ship delivers the best experience overall. So for our final stage review of the video, let's explore how exactly this sea dog managed to plunder so many hearts, including my own. First things first, this map has a naturally fun layout in its default arrangement, featuring 2 small platforms stacked on the mast, which can lead to exciting juggling scenarios and create opportunities for strategic and controlled vertical focused play. This greatly contrasts with the extremely hazardous horizontal blast zones. Fall in the water on the right, and you'll get carried away. Start swimming on the left, and you'll get meteor smashed to your death by the ship's hull. Take caution, because Pirate Ship will go out of its way to try and lure you near these dangerous waters. For instance, the small catapult that frequents the boat's deck can launch players out to sea, and the appearance of the King of Red Lions can entice you into taking the fight off of the main ship for a more high-stakes confrontation. But of all the random occurrences that can happen here, those are actually the two most mild ones. Keep an eye on the horizon, because if you see an enemy lookout poking out of the ocean, then the stage is about to be blasted with bombs from afar. Another visual cue to watch out for is a storm, as this can sometimes lead to the appearance of a cyclone that tosses your ship high into the sky, reducing gravity for a few seconds. The best part of this gimmick is how it interacts with the King of Red Lions. Fighting there during the Tempest would be ill-advised to say the least. Pirate Ship's final event happens when a warning sign appears above the vessel shortly before it crash lands into some rocks, greatly altering the stage's layout for a bit. This place may not have as much going on as somewhere like Summit, but all 5 of the gimmicks present are exciting, perfectly paced, and really help this seaborne adventure to come alive. Furthermore, Wind Waker HD's cartoony art style allows this stage to stand out even more and keep the action lighthearted. Can someone please tell Toon Link to get a new game where he drives a helicopter or something? Because every time this man brings one of his vehicles into Smash, it's absolute heat. I don't find it likely that this gem will be topped in a future installment, but I suppose it is possible. Until then, when I'm asked what my favorite map is in Smash Ultimate, the answer is clear. It's A Pirate's Life for me. Now that I've ranked all 115 stages, it's time to draw some conclusions based on my findings. First and foremost, do I think Smash Ultimate's map selection is overall good, bad, or somewhere in between? Well, here's a pie chart of how many stages were placed into each tier. From this we can see that I consider 59% of the stages in this game to be good at a minimum, and I'd only claim a mere 19% of the selection is outright bad or worse. That's less than a fifth of the lineup, and it doesn't even account for the fact that many of the good stages are placed well above the B tier, while very few stinkers are worse than D tier. So with all this in mind, I definitely say that Smash Ultimate's level selection is good overall. There's just a handful of bad eggs to watch out for, and don't forget, you can always just turn off the stages you dislike in the game's settings, so to an extent, the roster is as good as you make it. The Smash game with the worst overall selection for me in Ultimate turned out to be 64, and yeah, I think this is pretty unsurprising. It is the first game in this series after all, so the team was still finding their footing in terms of map design. But what did throw me for a loop was discovering the Smash entry with my favorite stage roster in Ultimate, because apparently it's Wii U that takes first place, with 3DS in a very close second. This project definitely gave me a deeper appreciation for Smash 4. Sure, those games don't exactly have much of an identity these days when their successor eclipses them in just about every possible category, but personally, I'm grateful that 3DS and Wii U paved the way for Ultimate to have such a killer lineup of stages by donating countless bangers. But those are just my extremely long-winded thoughts on the matter, and I'm excited to see what you all have to say. Feel free to let me know your thoughts and opinions about anything regarding Smash stage design down below. What are your favorites, your least favorites, and are there any that you think are really underrated? I want to give a huge shout out to Upper E for the footage used throughout most of the video, and of course I'd like to thank Sakurai and his team for making such an incredibly fun game in Smash Ultimate. If you enjoyed this project and want to see more videos like it in the future, please consider liking and subscribing. It also helps this content reach the people it interests most. Speaking of which, if you're new here, welcome! I've got plenty of other ranking videos that might interest you that I'll link above. Let me know what you think my next video should be about down below, and who knows, maybe I'll really like the idea, make a video, and shout you out. But I believe that is finally everything I have to say about stages in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. So with that, thank you all so much for watching. This has been Triple S, and I'll see you next time. I guess I'll just
Get eaten by a Bulborb.